Attention, please.
Yo. 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 Yo.
What's going on, everyone? It is David Palmer, the Leo King, and Dr. Ann Wohlcke here for History in the Stars. Today we're going to be looking at the echoes in the astrology of the French Revolution. It's going to be back. How are you doing, Dr. Ann Wohlcke?
I'm doing great, and yes, it is great to be back. I'm enjoying being back in the studio. I think last time we did a virtual show, right? So,
Been a minute.
Yeah, it has been. It's been over a month, or it's been a month, I think, since we even had a show. Hasn't it?
It's been a month, and then it's been almost 2 months since we were here at the studio doing the show. So,
Yeah.
time's been flying by. I mean, it's already Halloween.
I know. Very exciting.
2025. I gotta say, because I know we talked about it just the other day here, and we might not be going into it here today, but what did you feel for our audience out there that loves history to see King Charles III at the Vatican with the Pope after all these years, right?
It's such a normal occurrence. No, as a British historian, of course, and a historian who works on the Reformation as well, and is very aware of what happened in the split of the church during the Reformation with the formation of the Church of England. It's a shocking event. It's actually the most historic thing that's happened in a long time, and I hardly saw any coverage of it. I don't know if other people saw a lot about it, but the fact that the person who is the heir to the church that was established by Henry VIII, and a divorced monarch at that, right, who is the head of the Church of England, is praying publicly with the Pope, who is an American Pope. We talked about that aspect too.
Right.
There are so many historical lines that are coming together with that one moment. It's been a couple of weeks of historically strange things in the media, and that was one of them. So
that one shocked me. I did a whole live stream. I kind of felt bad. I felt bad that I didn't do it with you, but I was like, this is just crazy. This blew my mind too much.
Yeah.
I got to pick up the Sprite.
The Sprite just fell on the floor so we could have an interesting moment here. When I saw that, it actually, a lot of stuff happened just personally, lots of things going on in my family right when that was happening. So I heard it was happening, then craziness ensued in my own family. And then I saw the video of the Pope and Charles doing the prayers. But what I saw, I think you saw something different, because what I saw was the Pope reading most of a prayer and Charles maybe chiming in with a bit off to the side. That's what I saw, but I think you saw a little bit more in depth. They did more than what I saw.
Yeah, there was actually quite a lot of stuff that was being shown. But I think for me it was like seeing that they put thrones up together and both of them sitting on either side of each other. And the fact too that it was interesting because the Pope didn't, of course, like lead the prayer, and neither did the Archbishop of Canterbury, the head of the church well, technically the king is the head of the church, but the next person down. So it was kind of interesting to see 490 years and the media just talk about the divorce aspect of it, not really even go into the Reformation and how serious it is. And there's never been anything, like this.
No, and
since 1533 into 434, and all that happened, they just act, and then they even wrote the articles as if it was just a couple hundred years ago, but they were clear it was back in 1533, but they didn't allude to it the way you had to get deep in the article. I just thought that was really weird.
okay, but the craziest part, another crazy part of it, I guess I can't say craziest part, what was so interesting is that they were in the Sistine Chapel. And I
Right.
think you mentioned that in the live that you did about it, because because the Sistine Chapel was part of that whole effort of re-beautifying the Vatican, sort of fixing it up and raising tons of money so that the Vatican could be beautified, was one of the sore spots that touched off the Reformation for Martin Luther in the first place, all the way back in the 16th century.
Right.
So now, after all this split happens and the Pope excommunicated Henry VIII, the monarch who started the Church of England, now they come together in this structure that was the source of so much contention in the first place. It's a beautiful place. It's a really beautiful location, and I'm sure someone like Prince Charles, who is very much into art and history, he would have loved it, and architecture, right? That would have been the ideal place to host him. But just thinking about the symbolism of the whole thing in the Sistine Chapel,
know.
something you never thought you'd see ever, right? I didn't.
Never.
No one thinks about it anymore like a historian, right? It's not, everybody wasn't sitting there shocked on their, looking at their TV, seeing it. And in fact, most people may not have even known that it happened. Unfortunately.
No, I do have some of the imagery. So in the Sistine Chapel, which was being done by Michelangelo during the whole excommunication, the split of the church. So it's actually interesting that we're in the same astrology as Michelangelo painting it.
Right.
Right?
Yep. Of course, we're going off on the other astrology.
Right.
We're getting ready to talk about the French Revolution, which I think will connect. But
just the fact that that was also the chosen spot, and in that room is where, when Michelangelo was painting it, the Pope at the time was like making big decisions of excommunicating Henry, and of course then trying to really rally up France and any country really that he wanted to really try and go. And it's kind of hard because I don't know if it's how much of it's really recorded in those meetings, because even Henry's secret meetings with Anne Boleyn, and then also how to kind of handle the church, there's not a lot of recording because there were secret meetings. There's just recording that he had meetings, but they weren't logged. I was looking into the history of that during that time. And then also in the Vatican, it's just, of course, the excommunications, but there's not a lot of logging of the talks with cardinals and the Pope at the time and what they were going to do. It's just like the hearsay that people wrote in journals around. But it's kind of interesting because there was a lot of secret meetings happening.
yeah, a lot of secret meetings,
Right.
because they wanted to try to prevent that church, that particular split of the church. And the Pope had even agreed that he would legitimize one of Henry's illegitimate children in order so that Henry could have an heir. And Henry VIII refused that. He
There
just,
you go. Look at that.
yeah, I saw that part. And the other thing is, I think all of us are so used to, when we see images or watch video of the Pope, usually you hear the translation. So this was the first time I think he was talking, right? I want to play the video, but I think it's the first time I heard the Pope speaking an American accent and that I could understand what he was saying. It was just really, I think on many levels, if you watched that event, even if you don't know the history of the Reformation and why it's significant on that level, it just seemed like a weird thing. And then
Oh, yeah,
there's
Henry's-
Camilla up there. It's almost like, what if Henry VIII had gone to the Vatican and brought Anne Boleyn, and they all sat there and prayed?
Right.
It's really interesting.
Well, it's actually kind of interesting you bring that up because that's actually what Henry wanted, right? Henry the whole time was trying to say, "Hey, I'm not wanting to leave." Like
He was the defender of the faith. Remember, we talked about that.
And he was against Martin Luther, and he also at the same time had a legit case that was a good biblical question. It wasn't a bad one because verbatim in the Bible it does say you cannot marry your brother's widow.
And it contradicts itself, right? It's contradictory that it says in one place that you should marry your brother's widow, and in another place it says that you should not.
And then you have Thomas More, who then becomes a saint after this happens, and then of course he gets beheaded, right? But it's interesting that that's not talked about here either. That they made a saint for one of Henry's the top advisor and the author of Utopia.
Yeah.
Right? Because he stood up for the Catholic faith and he was too hard-headed. All he had to do was say, "Oh, I'm okay with this." And he had a family and he had a lot of kids, but he was so stubborn that he gets killed. And he doesn't get killed easy either. Like he gets made an example after. So I think it's really...
Yeah, they had to make an example out of him. He would have had to have that trial because, and also okay, sorry, I'm going to back up a little bit because when we go back and we think about Henry VIII now, we think of him from the perspective of the guy that had all of those wives and killed a couple of wives and divorced a wife and a couple of wives and all of that. So we don't think of at the time when Henry was excommunicated, people who lived at that time would have known, like 5 years ago, Henry was the the Pope's big supporter. He was defending the Pope against Martin Luther. You would have thought, okay, now what's going on? So maybe the people would have bought his argument also. A lot of people would have thought, he has a point. If you do look at the Bible in this way, you could agree with it. So someone like Thomas More, Henry really thought he could convince him because he believed the argument himself, most likely. I'm just going to go with that.
Right.
Because we tend to think of it as, he just wanted to get with Anne Boleyn. That was why. He wanted everyone to do what he wanted because of that. But he's coming out of the era of this English civil wars that had been happening, the Wars of the Roses. The Tudor dynasty is still not firmly established, and he needed to secure the lineage of that family. Now in this context, when Spain was such a big rival as well, and he's going to divorce this Spanish princess, it was a big deal. So if he went against Thomas More, who was so respected, and he was known as this great humanist who had written Utopia, like you said, people really respected him and valued his learning, he had to make a big example of it by having this legal case to be able to prove that he was legally wrong and that Parliament was backing up the king on executing this guy who was, basically like the most lauded literary guy in the kingdom who was so respected. Right. I guess it would be like, who is someone like that today? I was going to give an example, but I can't think of anyone. Today, if we all turned on someone everybody agrees is good and there's nobody today like that, I don't think.
I mean, I was thinking about this actually because it's the same astrology. I'll put it up in a second. It's kind of crazy. That's what made it really crazy, was the same astrology of Pluto Neptune. That it took the exact 490 years to get to the exact same retrogrades in the exact same degree for the king to be so exactly at the Vatican when Henry was excommunicated. So, but I was thinking of the relationship to that time period and Henry being a figure that He's very bold. It's kind of ironic because he is a little overweight. He has gout. So I know he's in his grave with his gout kicking the tomb he's in next to his second wife who he had a son with.
His gout was kicking. What?
Like I imagine him with his gout, you know, like kicking. But like I think of I think of Trump a little bit when I think of him as a world figure. Or then I was thinking also, oh, okay, what other kind of time periods are we going through right now? And it is very masculine, people not liking and then creating stories over very masculine figures that go against the grain.
He was in an era where there were 3 big monarchs that were going against the grain, I guess you would say, in their own ways. So you had Charles V in Spain, Francis I in France, and Henry VIII in England. Not to mention then whichever pope happened to be pope. I never know what to say on the sea.
Because the pope dies after the excommunication, and then a new pope comes in.
Yeah, so all these different popes have to deal with Henry's great matter,
right,
at different stages, and yeah.
So it's crazy because this is the actual astrology of the day, July 11th, 1533, the excommunication happens. And if you see right here, Neptune retrograde, 0 Aries, Pluto 1 degree and 51 minutes retrograde Aquarius. Now all I have to do is just go to, let's see, this was just November 23rd, right?
October 23rd,
right? So
yeah.
We'll just switch it now to October 23rd. And Neptune just like a day or two prior, 1, 2. Neptune at 0 degree, Aries, Pluto at 122 Aquarius.
That's crazy. I mean, okay, that's
and then that means that they were planning it. Like there was already so it might not be the Neptune within 2 days, but Charles was on his way over there. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It
makes you wonder if maybe they looked at the astrology and said, right now would be a good time for a reconciliation.
It's just beyond mind-blowing. The last time that could have happened was 1533.
But look at the rest of the astrology since. We know in 1533 they didn't know Neptune and Pluto existed. Right?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's some debate on that, but yeah.
Well, the people who were
yes, you're
out
correct.
in the open doing the astrology or whatever.
Yeah, astrologers were.
And so was there anything else similar to this earlier chart that you can see?
I mean, those 2 outer planets are pretty wild.
Yeah.
You always want to take the farthest things that are the most rare.
Yeah.
I mean, you could use that Saturn is in a conjunction with Uranus, and we're with Neptune, and this was Saturn and Neptune in square. Mm-hmm. You could look at it that way too, but really, it's the big shifting of the larger time.
Yeah.
With Pluto and Neptune moving into new signs in that year, same thing.
So then, in the earlier period of time, it's these 2 coming, or the excommunication of Henry would have been the point at which there's no reconciliation possible anymore.
Yes.
So then having the king in Rome, on that.
No, keep going.
On the next pass, it's like the reconciliation's happening at the exact same astrology. So what would you say is the larger meaning of that?
The other blip is Pluto out of bounds.
Right.
So this 1533 out of bounds.
Wow. And it's
And
not
so
even
10% of Pluto's transit around the sun, it's out of bounds. And that's when you get into Aquarius. What's crazy about our time is that's about to end and an end for about 1,000 years. So it's not going to be 10%. It's going to be 0% for 1,000 years out of bounds. So this is our last like reoccurrence for 1,000 years.
How long will it be out of bounds then? I don't remember.
It's going to be out of bounds for 1,000 years.
Oh, it's going to be out of bounds for 1,000.
No, I mean, it's going to be inbound. It won't go back out of bounds.
But when does it go back in bounds?
Pretty soon. Yeah, month-wise here. Oh, I'm going to have to do this. Oh, yeah, here's Pluto already back in bounds in a month.
Okay.
So it's in the days ahead. Okay, on November 22nd, the day that Neptune or Saturn stationing direct, that day. Within a day or two, yeah. Oh no, that's right, that's the Mercury retrograde, Saturn, Neptune, the 22nd, 23rd. So I think the 27th, 28th, so yeah. And then it won't go out of bounds. So if I just go months ahead, you won't see Pluto go out of bounds. Oh no, it does go back out of bounds again. These are like the last out of bounds moments that are happening.
Wobbling away in and out of bounds.
Right.
So what do you think about that? Will that be kind of a crazy time as it's going in and out of bounds?
I mean, this is where things get really weird. There, yeah, now you don't see it go out of bounds anymore. And so that's in many, many years. But this is like the last in and out of bounds time of Pluto and Aquarius in this Pluto cycle. Because if you go to Pluto ingress. Now, I haven't checked this myself. This is just what I've been overhearing. So you know what? People could be wrong. I haven't checked myself. That's why I don't talk about it a lot. Because I'm like, really? Is it? Let's just check right now. Let's go a year ahead.
When is the next?
Yeah, they are correct. There's Pluto just sitting at 18. It's actually south, but it's very inbound. That's crazy. Yep. So it's breaking. This is a pattern cycle breaker, but it's not going to happen anytime soon.
Why do we have so much of that astrology happening right now? We have the other. What's the other thing that hasn't happened since 4200 BC or whatever the date was?
Oh,
or
4361 BC is Saturn, Neptune, 0 Aries.
Right.
But I think one thing I want to draw a correlation with the French Revolution is, and using Thomas More as the example, is people are kind of made examples with Pluto and Aquarius, no matter what. Because the French Revolution is Pluto Aquarius. But it's weird because this Neptune Aries during 1533 was, Thomas More. Well, Anne Boleyn gets made an example. Even Queen Catherine gets made an example in a good way and a bad way, right? There's always like this good and bad look. And then there's everybody for Thomas More and everybody who's not. And you're seeing that right now in politics and all over the place. And then the French Revolution, it's like, no, these rich people, we need to cut all their heads off. These aristocrats, these people, they have it good. We have nothing. And that's also kind of based because watching the Americans say, fuck you to King George and become free, and the French backing the Americans, that's a seed into the French Revolution. And so I think it's like we are in times where these people being made examples of are going to become extreme. And I think that's where the Pluto going out of bounds is the rough part, because it does take humanity to look and see who's out of bounds, literally.
Well, it's almost like,
right? Like, who's out of bounds?
yeah, who's out of bounds,
You know?
but it's people in power pushing the limits so far that eventually it becomes so much that no one can believe it. Because I think right now what we see is a lot of people doing things that maybe even 10 years ago people wouldn't have done publicly, or we see political candidates that we wouldn't have seen 10 years ago, in the United States anyway. We see events happening around the world that become more and more crazy, or seem more and more tyrannical, for example, and people will tolerate it because they think, oh, there's a greater good. This is what reminds me, or makes me think of the French Revolution, the era of the French Revolution, because there was such a crisis and people were undeniably experiencing a crisis in France. There were food riots, there was food scarcity, there was famine, there was experimentation with prices happening that was causing a lot of suffering within the regular common people. And they felt, and common people felt like the people who were supposed to be responsive weren't being responsive anymore. The king wasn't solving the problems anymore in France, right? So when that context is happening, you have the emergence of these people who can get others to follow them with radical ideas. I mean, that's what we saw in France, or what people back then saw. I always put myself in the story as if I was there experiencing it. But I feel like I experienced the French Revolution because I've done so much reading on it. There's so many histories written about the French Revolution from every perspective. But I think it was a whole series of problems that were going on that couldn't be solved by the government in France. Lots of things, like even the American Revolution, aggravated the problems that were going on in France. And people had more and more crazy ideas of what to do to solve it. So pretty soon you get to publicly erecting a guillotine and just deciding that an entire class would be the enemies of the state. And then after you kill a whole bunch of them, everyone started to turn on each other. And it's just one of those situations where things get really out of control. And then, of course, it leads to the rise of Napoleon, who comes in and asserts a whole new order. So
Right.
Anyway, I don't remember why I was going off on that. What had you asked?
No, I think we were just talking about people being made examples of.
Yes,
Then you were
yeah.
talking about how power goes too far too, right? Mm-hmm. And that's definitely where, if we go back to 1533, it is kind of a move where the church has exerted its power too much. Because if you go back and you actually kind of deconstruct the history and all the things that were revealed after that excommunication and the separation, the monasteries, of course, were all corrupt. Not all, but a lot of them were. There was a lot of, ironically, a lot of the rituals, right, were not true to what the church was telling people. Like, they would say it was the blood of Jesus when it was like duck blood. That was one of the findings in the book, right? And that's what's really wild, is like they were like lying to people. Mm-hmm. But I think that also the power of the church telling what kings are supposed to do with their people, in a way, right? Like that's too much power. And so that's kind of an interesting part. And then Henry has to find his boundaries of power, because even though he does get what he wants, the rebellion that happens was not easy. He got lucky. I don't know how he survived and made it through afterwards from a civil war in his own country, and was able to negotiate and then tell everybody, no, I'll do what you want. And then everybody kind of leaves. And then, no, I'm going to screw you all. And then you all are going to kneel to me, up in the north. But that power thing you bring up is very important to play into because it plays into the French Revolution. I do want to just show, this is kind of random. I saw this today in the news, and this reminds me of Europe, and because I pay attention to tech news and money and VCs. So Europe's VCs, this is today, Europe's VCs are spending much faster than they are raising. There is no venture capital going into the European markets. Europe is suffering the lowest investment in decades.
That's crazy.
Right? Because they're not creating anything. There's no innovation out of Europe. So there's no innovation in technology because all of the AI is American, Chinese, all the chips, all the computer companies, all the internet companies, it's all United States based. So all this money, nobody's going to Europe and investing in some cool innovative idea. So the markets, they're just spending and then they're going into massive debt. And then they're trying to find ways to roll over their debt.
Well, that sounds a whole lot like the era of the French Revolution, by the way.
That's what I was alluding to, is that already the signs of poverty and kind of chaos of... People forget that when we had the financial crisis in 2008 in America, in 2009, there was also the European financial crisis from Greece, and that fallout that was worse in Europe than America. Because Americans kind of think it's always about us. We had a recession. It was actually worse in Europe. So if you're already seeing it, I mean, in America it's bad. In Europe right now, when you actually look at these venture capital reports and running on reserves, capital invested in European VC market is 5.2 times the amount raised by the region's investors. So what's raising the money is debt or capital that's based upon banks, loans, not investment money, not venture capital, right? Like it's really kind of... European VCs raised just 8.3 billion in the first 9 months of the year. At that rate, the capital raise for 2025 is projected to reach around 11 billion, less than half of 2024's total and the lowest annual amount this decade. Europe has yet to see a mega fund defined as more than 500 million close this year. Now, I know some people might be like, well, I don't know, no, this is really bad. All of Europe, not one venture capital investment has gone into a business that's been over 500 million. If I go back, now watch this. OpenAI is finally per profit. Do you know how many billions of dollars have been moving? Look at this, 500 billion. Microsoft is retaining 27% stake in a new $500 billion company. In Europe, you can't even get one business this whole year to get 500 million. Not one. Not one. That's how bad Europe is right now. It is the worst place you could be. I would rather be in China. You could scrap there.
Right.
You can't scrap in Europe right now.
No.
This is why they're wanting to go to war too, which is really weird. Because what's happening is people in Europe are taxed the highest. Now, businesses aren't getting any money. They're relying on reserves. They're relying on capital loans through the banking system there to survive, but there's nothing ahead for them in innovation. So my question to you would be, now that we're switching to the French Revolution, would be, because the American Revolution happens and the French Revolution starts to kick off a couple years after the American Revolution. And so technologically wise, Europe or England already has been beginning its industrial revolution. But what was happening in France and the surrounding areas with like innovation? Because there is kind of a weird period where the innovation of we did the gun episode, right? That's more 1840s and 1850s. But there's not a lot of big innovative things. The printing press was like the big thing, of course. But you have like people like Benjamin Franklin, of course, who are experimenting and coming up with cool ideas. I mean, Newton's already dead way before that. So it's like there's not a lot of innovation, I feel, coming out of Europe at that time in history. Do you think that played into the French Revolution?
Yeah, the financial aspect of everything that was happening at this time is a major cause of the French Revolution. So France didn't have the same type of economically liberal policies that England had. Or Great Britain, I mean. So Britain was able to operate as a state, but they could borrow money from the private sector through the Bank of England. So they established their bank very early on. And then they had these companies like the East India Company, where they had agreements that they could go out and expand and use their capital to do that. And then the government of England would legitimize what they were doing out in the world. So it was basically private investors or groups of people investing money who were going out and expanding things in the British world. In France, everything was more centrally organized. It was much more absolutist, with the king controlling all of this. But also at the same time, the French military was expanding, fighting all these wars in Europe, and not able to really finance it because it depended upon taxes. But they had sort of an antiquated taxation system. They weren't taxing the nobility in the church because of ancient privileges. They relied on only income from the third estate or the people who were investing money in enterprises in France. The state's not giving them any sort of benefit to do that. They are taking the money. They're taking taxes from them because they had this old system of thinking, we just need to extract the money from the people in our country that have the money, and then we can use that to finance everything. Meanwhile, England has investment, and it's incentivizing investment, and the state is benefiting from that. I mean, this is a huge historiographical debate where people look at why was there a revolution in France, and in England there wasn't a revolution in the country itself, right? But there was the colonies breaking away, which in the end didn't really hurt Great Britain that much because they moved on and colonized in India instead. Right. And it wasn't a wonderful thing. They weren't happy about losing the American colonies. They tried very hard to keep them, but financially it paid off for them. So this is why, I don't know, things just took a different track in France, and they had huge problems in the 1770s and 80s because they overextended themselves doing things like helping us win the American Revolution, right? But not being able to make the money back. So
right. Well, I think it's interesting because what I did here is I'm going to do a couple things first. One, I just wanted to look at today. When you think of the French economy, debt pile has pushed French economy to the brink. 2 weeks ago, political instability has caused near stagnation in the French economy. Political instability in France, because we've seen the prime minister having to get rotated so many times now because the government gets locked and then everybody says, no, let's get rid of him. And that was just like in the last month and a half. And so Macron has been kind of in a weird spot with only a couple people left he can put in there in that position. French economy plunges back into uncertainty after the prime minister's call of confidence vote. That was 8 weeks ago. France's richest man riles left with attack on pseudo-academic behind tax plan. France's economy struggles to grow as tariffs threaten fresh drag. That was 26 weeks ago. New nightmare for Macron as French economy spirals into chaos 6 weeks ago. Then I just want to go, all right, I did it for 1789, the French economy, but that was when the Bastille was seized and people really, that's the beginning of the French Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
It was in a state of crisis marked by national debt from wars, a regressive tax system, as you were talking about, the economic hardship for the lower classes due to a combination of factors, including the poor harvests, which actually there is a lot of that data through COVID, right? What they were doing in Europe with the farmers and the farmers having to strike in the Netherlands, in Germany, and all, right? Like, it is really weird, a lot of the similarities that Pluto and Aquarius is popping up here. And then rising food prices and falling wages. And the problem with the French economy is it's connected to the European Union. And so there's only so much it can do. And then it's all relying on how the larger government of all of Europe is, which is stagnant as well. And there's nobody putting money into those economies in all of Europe, as I just showed you, right? So it's kind of like, then you have the, Macron, who's very much trying to spearhead NATO and NATO alliances for Ukraine, and even talking about building the military up and really wanting to be the centerpiece for the military for Europe, like have the French as the lead of the military there over this last year. So I think it's really interesting to see people there probably like, what's going on? Or we saw the Olympics there just last year. And that was a really weird kind of Olympics, the way that it was projected to the world. People on the street saw things different than what they expected. There was weird people taking out the trains there. Right, there was sabotage that was happening.
And the river, when they poured the stuff
people
in the river.
couldn't even swim in there because it was so bad and dirty.
Well, someone poured a bunch of E. coli in there too, right? I mean, it was bad, but then they made it worse. I don't remember.
So then here's the chart of the story of the Bastille, and it's very interesting astrologically wise. One is Jupiter is coming into Leo next year, 2026, and going to make its first opposition to Pluto in Aquarius, and that would have been the same first opposition to Pluto in Aquarius from Jupiter. It might have actually been the second if it came in 1778. Oh, no, it wouldn't have been. Nope. I already do that math in my head. This would have been the first Jupiter opposition to Pluto in Aquarius, and we're going to see that in 2026. The other thing that gets to me too is that Saturn was retrograde in Pisces like it is now at the end of Pisces. The other thing is a transit that's approaching an opposition to Neptune in a cardinal sign, where we're about to see in 2026 Saturn and Neptune finally meet in a cardinal sign. So there's a lot of connections. Ironically, it was also a moon in Aries that day, which Aries is going to be a huge player in whether it was Neptune in the 1530s or going back to, but with Pluto and Aquarius. But there is something where revolutions and big breaks and people really getting the energy to storm the Bastille or leave the church and even go after the king because they want to keep the church. I mean, you look at it, and whenever there's Aries and Aquarius involved with Pluto, and Pluto's out of bounds, this is what we see. So to me, it's like we're getting pretty toasty. The other thing, too, is Mars will be back in Gemini again in 2026 as well. So there'll actually be a moment, and I watch this. I could probably find it really quick. Let's just go a year from now. So Jupiter will have already opposed Pluto. Mars will be already in Leo. So yeah, we can go backwards to get to that Mars in Gemini again. And then remember, America has Mars in Gemini, right? During the Revolutionary War, beginnings of the Declaration. So I'm just going to put this at the top of the chart. So Mars is going to come in to Gemini in June of 2026, and then Jupiter right behind it. So if we just go the days, and the Jupiter opposite Pluto at 4 degrees here, Mars will be in Gemini as well during the Jupiter-Pluto opposition. Saturn, Neptune in Cardinal, Aries, they were about to oppose in 1790 and 91, right after, which is all the French Revolution. So it looks very similar.
That's interesting for a lot of things. So even if you think about May of 1789, which is really when things kind of kicked off for the French Revolution, because things had gotten so bad.
We can look at that time period.
Yeah, just when was the first Estates General? Let me see. I can find the date of the convening of the Estates General that I can't spell. Just gives me May 5th, 1789.
I was close. I put 15th.
The Estates General convened in Versailles.
Oh, look at that. Mars 13 degrees with Uranus. Oh, sorry. I don't know why Astro Gold has been doing that lately. May 5th. Oh, May 5th.
Cinco de Mayo, 1789.
1789. Mars in Aries, Saturn is direct. It's on its way to get ready to come into Aries.
Well, and then the Third Estate declared itself the National Assembly June 17th, 1789. And that's really kind of the Third Estate taking over.
June 17th.
Mm-hmm.
So it's what? There? It's at the end of, it's in July of 1789, the storming of the Bastille. And that, look at Jupiter just went into Leo June 17th, 1789. And the beginnings to the opposition of Pluto are beginning, and Mars is getting ready to come into Gemini.
So, you know, what's happening during that period of time is that the king, because it's gotten so bad in France, the king has to call the Estates General, which hadn't been called since 1614. And he has to call them so that they can figure out how to solve this whole fiscal issue. And this is the timeline of what happens from that point. They are, and this is always what happens in history when the king finally has to bring in the representative body of whatever type, because this isn't that representative. So the Estates General is made up of the 3 estates in France. It's the clergy, the nobility, and then everyone else, but that's really just like the people who have property or businesses, the sort of middle class. But every one of those bodies has one vote. And so the Estates General could use this, or I mean the Third Estate could use this as an opportunity to try to give itself some political rights. Because remember, this is the era of the American Revolution and the Enlightenment, and people want more rights. Other European nations had been figuring out ways to include more representation, even under absolutist monarchies. I mean, you could look at Catherine the Great's world or whatever. There were a lot of monarchs who were trying to incorporate some Enlightenment institutions, but in France that wasn't the case. the king had to be forced to draw this group together. So then the third estate tries to make changes, but they can't because they're always outvoted. Because if every body has one vote, the clergy and the nobility always band together, and that leaves the third estate who pays most of the taxes. So, right, it's that issue again of we're being taxed and we don't have a voice. Right.
It reminds me that we saw the Yellow Jacket movement in France, and then, of course, Notre Dame, the day that the president is supposed to address the whole country and all their yellow jackets, Notre Dame goes on fire. And then it gets squashed. So I feel like that whole Yellow Jacket movement is been suppressed, and it's about to, like, the lid's about to come off.
Well, I would think if we go by this astrology, if something happens similarly, there would be a situation where those people have to be called in for their voice. And they'll have so much power that they will be able to withstand, or they'll be able to hold out. Because that's what happened in this case was the third estate left and they said, we're not coming back until this can be remedied, that we actually have a voice. We want a constitution. And they force the king to agree to having a constitution. And then they come back together and they start to form a new type of government that's a constitutional monarchy. That's what it was going to be at first. Then it started to spin out of control really from there. But that was the issue at the beginning, was just this idea of sovereignty and the king having to call them because of needing their authority, needing their representation to support making the situation better in France.
I just was looking at this, that during the economy, that all of the goods that were coming in were being re-exported.
Right. Well, this is the thing that's the problem in France, is that there's all this state control of the economy also. And it worked in an earlier age. But the other thing they were doing to solve the grain problem, to solve the problem of prices within France, was that they deregulated the price of grain. And then what the people did who had the grain was, so they made it so that there weren't price controls. But the people who had grain started to send it to whoever could pay the highest price. And the poor people continued to starve. And so there's that issue happening. And then also, of course, you're going to sell your goods to wherever these individuals can make the most money from. It was a mess economically.
Listen to this, that in the 1740s, that the economy, was growing 2%. And it was a good time, but it was because of British investors. And then, of course, the steam engine, but also in the textile industry, and also in printed fabrics, mines, textiles, metal. But what's really weird is that it goes on to say, capital remained difficult to raise for commercial ventures. However, and the state remained highly mercantilistic and protectionist and interventionist in the domestic economy, often settling requirements for production quality and industrial standards and limiting industries to certain cities. This is exactly what's happening right now.
Yeah, and why is that happening? Right, so at this time that was happening to protect the old interests, because there was this notion that the aristocracy, the nobility, they should have the power. And we need to regulate all of this, because if we don't regulate it and keep the money in our country, and if we start to invest it in ways where it leaves or whatever it is, somehow they're going to lose control and they will lose power. And they felt like France would lose wealth, which was an old view. And there was a lot of Enlightenment thought. There were new ideas about how to organize the economy in France, but they would try to implement things too quickly or haphazardly. And, it's like you can't go from state control to suddenly we're all going to be capitalists,
Right.
without a lot of people getting hurt, and that, or getting starving to death, I guess would be the thing.
Well, I think that's where the problem is, because the innovation even is coming from the British by investing, but
Yeah.
also bringing the innovation itself to France.
Right. Yeah.
So there's not much innovation going on, and then capital, it becomes difficult. And I just showed today, when I saw that, because it kind of is like making, in the venture capital world, Europeans freak out that are even paying attention. Most people don't pay attention to this stuff, but like 9 months in to 2025, I know it's been 10 months, but they've got 9 months of data. $9 billion, that's it. Like the whole Europe, all of Europe, where every day you see an American company raising 15 billion, and that's normal, or 4.5 billion is low. Like 100 million is like multiple VCs a day are investing $100 million in companies in America every day. So when I look at what's happening there, I'm nervous for Europe.
Well,
You know,
okay,
but especially
so
France, because you, as I showed those articles, you know, they are, you know, they're not under a monarch anymore. But the whole like making an example out of people is what I'm afraid of, because like to me, when I think of the French Revolution, I think of the guillotines, and I think of people like going into the homes of, you know, the higher class. And I really think of the class warfare and the lower class just taking it to the higher class. And then I think of what's happening in New York right now with the new mayor race. And, you know, he's very much using the class warfare and the rich against the poor. And then there are now people coming out and saying, oh yeah, if he comes mayor, we're just going to go take over rich people's places or whatever. You know, it's like those sentiments are kind of going out. And all you need to see is an American media covering a little bit of that in New York in the next year, and Europe being like, well, we've done this before. France, we've done this before.
and then what? So that they've done it before, and then what
it's
would
out
they-
on the streets and rich people getting pulled out of their homes.
Oh,
and,
in Europe.
yeah, and especially France. That's like, when I think of the French Revolution, that's what always gets me the most, is taking the rich people and putting them on a guillotine and cutting their
Yeah, I
heads
mean,
off.
I was talking about this for my class. I was talking about what happened to the Marquis de Lafayette. So he was our big hero during the French Revolution. He goes back home, and what happens is that the French Revolution, you know, happens, and he's a constitutional monarchist. So for a while, and they need him for their wars because France is still at war, which it has all these wars. That's a continuing problem during the late 18th century. And so they need him for the wars, but while he's away in Austria, I think, or somewhere out of France, he gets held captive, and then his wife's mother and sister get taken up and executed by the guillotine. I might have mentioned this before. I feel like I said this before. So
I didn't know the slave trade was still happening in France too. Then.
yes, and the Haitian Revolution happens also during this period of time, a little bit later. But yeah, I was going to ask you something though. We can talk about this, but I wanted to say something about the role of America.
Yeah.
Because here's the interesting part. So you were looking at today, and how you've got these venture capitalists who are doing much better in the United States than in Europe. Let's just put it that way.
It's not
right?
even comparable.
And it's something that our current administration is seeming to support. And we do have some of the similar issues to the French Revolution in the United States right now as well, that I think we were going to go towards talking about. But here's the thing I was thinking. In the 18th century, we had promised France we would come back and help them out, right?
And we didn't.
And we didn't. But also the terror happened, and the new government in America realized that it couldn't do it. I mean, we've talked about this, that logistically it wouldn't have made any sense for a new nation to try to go and help out in France. But are we now going to have to help out? Like, could it be a scenario where now the United States comes back in and invests similarly to how Britain was sharing its technology in the 18th century? Do we have some kind of debt now that we have to pay back and share our industry back?
No, what's happening is, here's a good example today. Nordic Capital agreed to an $8.9 billion sale. The deal comes as European investors find liquidity through exits of U.S. companies. Right? So they're just taking, to survive, they're selling their investments they've made in America because the markets are so high. But that's desperation.
Yeah.
Right? So that might be, of course, a little bit, right? So it's kind of like America's paying back by like, hey, we're doing really well in markets, maybe not in wages and job markets and housing and food and
Prices.
right, and health insurance, or right, all these other areas. But when you just think of GDP, it's not even comparable. And the whole idea of the European Union was to counter Americans' GDP, right? Because together they became bigger than America GDP-wise. But what you're seeing in the European financial crisis of 2009, especially 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, was the GDP not being able to even compete, right? And now we're seeing that again. And so now you're seeing companies over there in Europe seeing the increase and being like, let's sell some of our stock that we have over there because there's a lot of money there, because there's no way anybody's going to give us money. Or, so if I did like, so another one would be, so even European chemical sector, prolonged slump unsettles investors. So even like all the chemicals that are made in Europe, it's almost like somebody's asleep at the wheel over there, which kind of makes me like, maybe this is where America's one consistency is we work hard over here. And so there's always the debate of, well, in Europe, they get all these socialized kind of life. You pay more, but you get free health care, and you get like 2 weeks to more vacation, maternity leaves longer, stuff like that. But then it's a question of the quality of life, because if it doesn't go well there, like it's not going now, it almost like those systems fall apart and everything.
And everybody always
And then you've
says that
paid
about
everything
Europe.
and you don't have anything left.
Right. But I just wonder, if we look at the European Union as a whole, do they have exactly access to the same things in every country, every member nation?
No.
You know, is that even a fair comparison?
No.
Because we have to think about the fact that they all had to come together to compete economically with the United States. So
Right.
we have to kind of look at them as a region made up of all these different states where things are very different in each region.
Yeah, so just the other industries, aerospace and defense, and that's where the money's going.
In Europe?
Into sharpen focus on weapons and hardware, on the UAVs, right? And like different drones. And so European defense tech startups are raised $4.2 billion in the first 9 months of this year. That's half of all the money that got invested in Europe this year. What's scary is
Wow.
$4.2 billion is nothing in the scheme of countries and world right? There's hundreds of trillions of dollars of the GDP of the world, right? Mm-hmm. But for some reason, there's just nothing going into Europe. Then people aren't buying in Europe anymore, right? And then tourism was low as well, right? So that's where it's like, where are they going to fund all these services? And they're taxing people in France and throughout the European Union over half their wage. And they're not getting anything really back. And they're getting problems, and they're getting war talk, right? If you think about all the talks of Macron over the last year, 90% of it's about Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's kind of a scary place, because this is echoing a lot of like people's concerns, and like the world is like, I'm not betting on Europe. If that's what VCs are, is like, we're not betting on Europe. And then when you see the European companies that bet on America going, our last ditch effort to get capital to keep my business alive is to sell in order to bring money in to keep my business and operations going, because there's no help, and the only help are banks, where I'm going to have to pay a lot and it's harder to get. And they've made crazy regulations in Europe, right? Even Deutsche Bank almost went out recently, right? When SVB in America almost did. So you have really scary scenarios where you can't get capital. And most Europeans don't have debit cards, right? Like we have, so they rely on PayPal and these other services. They don't have a central banking system as the same as America does, right? And protections and so forth. So, and America might have its debt and its problems too, but it finds always a way to, right? If you're printing your own money and you're also creating things people want and getting investment at the same time, it kind of, it's still a bad machine, but it's a machine that there's enough to work with to keep it running. But right now, there's nothing to keep it running over there.
Well, I think what is really interesting to think about too is how, if you talk about the big expenditures in the military, in aerospace and military spending, that makes me think of how France's turmoil in the 18th century was really sort of ended when Napoleon took over, and it became more of a fiscal or a military state, where this guy, right, Napoleon Bonaparte,
Right.
comes through this new system. So France wasn't really innovating or economically very well in the 18th century, but they were innovating in the way they trained the lesser nobility. Like Napoleon came from a noble family that was impoverished. Like they were the poor nobility. And he was in an area that France had annexed. And in order to then participate in becoming a French citizen, especially in this new republic when that starts to get founded, he goes through the system of military schools, and all of their new thought and the new enlightened thinking about how do we train soldiers, that the Enlightenment was being applied within military schools.
Right.
And so they were training these new type of soldiers who not only fought well because they were learning mathematics and they were learning how to do the newest artillery, and they all were supposed to be educated in being the best technical soldiers, but they were also supposed to know, why were you fighting? What are the values you're fighting for? And you're now this new group of these young people who were Pluto Capricorns at the time. And I always think about that. I wonder if that generation's the first generation that actually gets to build something new, because they were born in the dismantling of the old system.
Right.
And even though they're being indoctrinated or whatever, they're being educated by the older generations, they still think of the institutions in a new way. They're the first generation that gets to grow up with the new system in place. So for In America, it's different. Like they get to grow up in, oh, there's a whole new country. We get to be part of it. In France, it's like we're growing up and these people don't know what they're doing. There's no one in control. They're all killing each other. And Napoleon rises up through the ranks and is this new type of man who totally takes control.
Right.
And goes in this completely new direction where he's like, okay, everyone, we're having enlightenment rules or laws, and I'm conquering everywhere, and everyone's getting them. It was
Right.
equality by force, you know?
Well, and I think that's an American rub-off of the Revolutionary War, is to have a country not have a monarch and rule themselves, and then also form the militias, and then make laws allowing militias to form, to have guns. And then also the idea of like West Point, all these things come really quick. Like a civilian army that's for the country and not a king. And then you have the Treaty of Paris and so forth that of course happens, and Benjamin Franklin's influence on French politics to showing, hey, we can do what we want.
Yeah.
Like, right? Like there's this kind of, and we're actually smart, and we're actually making things happen over here. And like, if you think of a British soldier, I mean, they're just kind of drones. It reminds me of Star Wars a little bit. Drones, just like, I'm here for the Empire. Like, okay, I'm here to, I got my red, okay, I have my red coat
The
on, and just send me on the boat. And I just, yes, I'm doing it for the king.
Well, that they knew what they were doing, and they were also trained. I think Britain and their idea of the red coat, whatever that was called, really, they ended up training the very force that rose up against them.
Right.
Right. So Americans could take those same ideas about warfare and then use them against Britain, because in Britain they still had, the issue would have been, they still had that notion that, well, there's a certain class of people who are born to be the leaders in the military,
Right.
and that got in the way of leadership. I mean,
Correct.
yeah, like it would just make this old system that George Washington, in the way that he led the army, he could do it differently and raise up people for their ability, not necessarily their birth,
Right.
you know?
And was in a French-Indian war against the British, or with the British against the French.
Yeah.
And actually was in some heavy, intense, hard hand-to-hand combat. And it wasn't about his bloodline.
No.
But I think that's where, so I just saw this article was about 3 weeks ago, or it was a week ago, that the companies that have been getting money in Europe have been the ones that are on their third, fourth, sixth round. So that reminds me of the French Revolution, where it's like only the companies that have been established and been getting money from venture capital. So when you think of how slim it's been in the last year, the only ones getting it are ones that have already gotten it prior. So no new businesses are getting money in venture capital from other countries and stuff. So that's kind of scary, because it's like the funds are just going to places where the funds have already gone. Crowded co-investments, right? So it's just like the same places are getting money. So that reminds me of the French Revolution a little bit, right? It's like these people get all the extra and we don't.
What does this mean? I don't understand this language. We are starting to see some large UK players, which are used to the European markets, changing and starting to implement US waterfalls. What do you know what that even is?
The idea of like how American companies, you pour a bunch of money in and then it just becomes a waterfall of cash. Right? Right?
Okay.
It would require adaptation of the systems, the expertise in multi-currencies infrastructure. So they're talking about how like the growth, like American growth is like a waterfall of money and movement and flow and GDP and cash flow and venture capital, profit share, right? Because America's really about the bottom line. We might not be in our government, but in private industry, right? In the private world, you don't, even though there's troubles with debt, what you're seeing is in the AI world, like OpenAI will make a deal with NVIDIA. I'm buying 100 billion in chips. And then NVIDIA will send that 100 billion back. Well, we're investing in OpenAI 100 billion. And then OpenAI will be like, oh, hey, AMD, we're investing 100 billion in you. And then AMD will give that 100 million to Microsoft. And you're just seeing them helping each other out tax-wise. And that's the other thing is an American tax system. You can set up an 83B Corp, meaning that at the beginning, you just already have set what the share price is at the lowest rate, and you only pay the tax when the big investment money comes in. And so the investors already know, like, okay, great, we're going to invest, let's say 100 million, the tax will be this, and then we're done, and then there's no more tax. Where Europe, it's like, no, it doesn't matter. Let's take this money. So like, there's some tax loopholes, but it's not the same as in America. So, and this article is actually going in that European managers of businesses are desperate in many ways and are hoping that Americans are, what ways can we get Americans to look over here to bring new revenues and new sources of capital because we're not getting anything here.
Yeah.
So that goes along with that astrology of Jupiter in Leo opposite Pluto in Aquarius, right? It's very much, well, who's kind of got all the good, happy life and who does it? Pluto in Aquarius is not happy. People think it's a happy time. It's not. Pluto is he's got a grudge, Pluto, and it's in Aquarius. It's like cold, detached. It's not about any kind of the sunshine of Leo, right? It's the coldness and the drifty, far away. Plus, it's Pluto out of bounds in Aquarius. It's out in the coldest and the cold and the dark. It's not very light down south there, and Aquarius is not a very bright constellation.
Right.
Very
so
cold. There's no. It's not a nice place. I mean, if you just think of where 2021, Saturn and Jupiter get in there, the world was dark in the degrees where Pluto is, right? So Jupiter in Leo opposite Pluto Aquarius is very much aristocrat and then people at the bottom who are willing to kill Pluto.
Well, I mean, that's the perfect thing about, I mean, anyway, not perfect, but we see that so perfectly in the food riots where they marched to Versailles, the people, and I'm trying to see what year that was. I lost my timeline here.
Well, I'll bring up an interesting one, like because America, we're about to see the food stamp stop and the SNAP programs.
Yeah, October 5th.
Those were implemented in 1937 into 39 when Saturn was retrograde in Pisces after being in Aries the last time. The last time Saturn went in Aries, retrograde back to Pisces was 1937. And that was when they drew up the plans. It took a couple years for it to get out. But it's kind of weird that the last time we had Saturn retrograde back into Pisces, now food stamps are being taken away for the first time in America. It hasn't happened since 39 when they were put out. But it's kind of crazy because now the amount of people, it's like 15 million to now somewhere between 44 million people receive EBT a year and every day. And then a lot of those are illegal immigrants, right? So then you also have kind of that weird in America. You're seeing it in the world, the warfare of like, who's a legal immigrant and who's not? Because my tax dollars are letting you get away with things, and you can go to a hospital and get free everything and not pay $1. Because that's happening in America, but it's also happening overseas too, right? It's like, everybody there is working, getting over half their wage. And the illegal immigrants are there just, okay, no problem. So that's, I think, going to be the beginning first. The clash of the illegal immigrants and citizens of countries. Because that's very Jupiter opposite Pluto, too.
I wonder if it was still Jupiter. Was it Jupiter opposite Pluto in October 5th through 6th, 1789?
Yes.
That is just the moment
That's
where you
actually
see the
when
biggest clash.
That's actually when the opposition really began. So if we go to, what was the date?
October 5th through 6th, 1789. So it's a women's march where the Parisian women...
Jupiter opposite Pluto had just
can you show
happened.
the...
Oh, yeah, sorry. So on October
5th to 6th.
Man, it doesn't. Just do October 5th. Jupiter opposite Pluto. So technically, the opposition happened. Transiting, September 2nd is the exact opposition date. And it was with the moon on Pluto exact when it happened.
That's September 2nd?
Yeah, so within a month, the exact opposition had happened.
Wow.
Right?
So yeah, it was, it was a riot of women leading the march because as we know, I think, did that happen in the Boston Tea Party also that some people dressed up as women? We dressed up, or the people dressed up like Native Americans and some maybe as women, but it was a way to protest. If the women are up front and marching, you know it's bad, right? And so they marched to Versailles October 5th, 1789, and they demand accountability from the king and also Marie Antoinette, who has to come out on the balcony. And then this is where that legend had already been started, that Marie Antoinette said, oh, if the people can't have bread, let them eat cake, which actually she didn't say, but Rousseau had written something earlier about a decadent princess who was out of touch with the people who said something similar. And so obviously they applied that to Marie Antoinette. But it's just a moment of where there's a huge clash of cultures. Like you had the royal way of being at Versailles that was so out of touch from the ordinary person that things had gotten so far apart, like that opposition, that it's like the Jupiter side couldn't even see the other side. It was blinded by its own splendor.
I think there was that same thing right after the American Revolutionary War. A lot of those British, colonies, of course, became states, but the properties and the big land and those big, huge, beyond mansions. I mean, they're like, some of the biggest properties in the world locally just got sold to the locals, and they kicked all the British out, and they either had to go to Canada or get back on a boat.
So a redistribution of wealth.
So there was but in America it's different. You can go to any city and it's kind of the same thing, but you have a way to make it up, right? Because there's not a lot of we're not relying on the government. Now, there are people in America who do, and those are the people freaking out right now. But the majority of Americans do not. We don't feel the government shutdown. We don't feel, unless it's TSA stuff or something, we're not feeling the government in our lives. But when you're in a system like in Europe, everybody's on the same thing. So everybody's got a health care card. Everybody's got to register for their job the same way. Everybody's got to pay attention to what the EU is doing. Everybody's on the same. That's where it gets scary to me, is when everybody's on the same thing. Pluto and Aquarius will be good if you can be your unique self and free to do whatever you want.
Now, why is it that people think, I continue to hear this, and I'm going to ask you to stop and talk about this a little bit, because a lot of people think Pluto and Aquarius means that crazy image of the Aquarian age that you showed once on one of your specials, where you showed like all the people in the same clothing,
Right.
all being like 70s weirdos. I don't remember what you showed, but they were all the
right.
same. It was kind of like the Heaven's Gate idea.
Or even at rallies now, right? Whether it's on the right or the left, right? Everybody has their look.
Yeah.
Right.
So how do people end up falling into that expression? Are they being coerced into it, or
it's the seduction of Pluto always? Mm-hmm. So in Capricorn, it was the seduction, ironically, after a financial collapse because of the corporations and the government and the fascist government we were under. Technically, it was fascist moves by investing money into private equity banks and having them gamble to help the American economy, and having the government give GM money and Chrysler. That's fascist. So that was Bush and Obama. Those were fascist regimes. But Pluto's, so in Capricorn, after all that, what happens? And you get a little bit into the transit and everybody wants to have a corporate job because of the security. So then people become weird that I don't want to have a job at a private, like, small business. That's unreliable because of 2008 and 9. I want a corporate job because subconsciously they don't realize the pull is they're safe. They make a lot of money. They've got rules. They've got established energy, and they're going to be okay, and my job's going to be okay. Even though I have to do all these, because if you watched from 2010 all the way through the end that we just went through in 2024, the corporate rules got tighter and tighter and tighter on people, including what you could wear. Ooh, Fridays you're allowed to wear jeans. Weird stuff like that, right? I never grew up with any of those, any jobs I worked at. But then also this, like, so it's a seductive thing where it's like, oh yeah, I work for this company, this corp, and I'm safe, and they've got corporate housing, and I'm going to a big conference. Right? That became the seduction for the average person to feel like they're a big dog. And then in the business world, it was, I've got the new big app and I'm famous and by my business or how much money, right? So nobody cares about that anymore.
No, and the universities did the same thing in terms of we're going to become very corporate in the way we administer a university.
So now in Aquarius, it becomes the seduction of, well, look at all these people are the same and I can be like them.
And what are those people doing?
So that means they haven't found the opposite, which is like, think of Pluto Capricorn in the corporate world. The opposite is Cancer, right? A small business that's run by a family or whatever. That became like people didn't want to do that.
Well, it became so difficult for people to even do that at all. It was
but there was also a stigma around it, from what I noticed.
Well, especially the people who were singled out in COVID for violating violating any rules were usually some private
So
group.
it came back, Pluto always comes back to bite you hard, right? So COVID's a great example, Pluto Capricorn, like, oh, you think it's great, this corporate job you have? Well, they have over 100 employees, so you have to get the shot in order to work. Right? Oh no, you can't come in, you need a test, you need to follow all these rules. And so that did not work out well. So Pluto and Aquarius, it doesn't work out well. The more that you're on the same level. So actually, even though there was class warfare in France, I would look at it as it's just very much two sides all the same, rich and poor. And everybody's got a similar thing going on. When it's too much, everybody's on the similar page, that's when it actually goes bad. So you actually want diversity through just natural.
Yeah, it's like everybody's joining the two biggest teams.
Correct.
Like they're all
in America,
off.
You don't see that. I mean, I just drove through America again, right? It's like people just do their own thing. Every city has its, okay, people are here, people are there, but people are all still commuting to work, different jobs. Every state's different, every city's different. Whereas like you go to Europe and you go to France, everybody's got a similar, you could relate with somebody on the same thing. I have to do my job this way, I have to pay this much tax, I have to do that. Where everybody in America, it's different. It's like, well, over here, we don't do this, but we do that. We do, right? Everybody's got a different thing.
But
So
if
that's
you
why
look at
America doesn't really go crazy in Pluto Aquarius. It just frees itself from all the people, and hence look at the trade deals and like, sorry, we're not going to play your guys' game.
But it's interesting to have social media now because
Which is controlled by America.
Right. But within American social media, even, you can have this presentation that makes it look like everybody is the same.
Yeah, because America is a North Node in Leo. Its goal is to look like that's the place to be, look like the cool spot.
But I would assume, if it's North Node in Leo, it's like you want to look the way to be, but it's not all the same. It's not
correct, right?
Like, so but our temptation would be we want to look. We try to fit ourselves in some box.
Yeah, so like part of why I predicted the end of the Democrat Party in 2024 was Pluto coming into Aquarius, the South Node being in Aquarius for the chart of America. That Pluto on the South Node's not a bad transit. Pluto on the North Node's a hard one. Because at the South Node, you realize, you know what? Yeah, this is too much the same. And so what you're seeing in like the Democrat Party right now is they're kind of grasping at straws now. And now it's very apparent they're the ones that have shut the government down and won't vote. And it's ironic, they're the ones who fight for the benefits so much of healthcare and SNAP benefits and food stamps, yet they're the ones not budging to let it.
Yeah, it's really weird.
Right.
And meanwhile, that's allowing this movement in a place like New York.
Right.
These democratic socialists, as their shirts said, that you showed me that. If you look at that image, just of all the people in the background behind.
Right.
Is it Zohar? Wait, what is his last name?
Zohan or Zol?
Not Zoltar.
It's not.
Zoltar.
I mean, it looks like his actual signs look like Zoltar, which is really weird, and he actually looks like Zoltar. But yeah, no.
I mean,
Zohan, I think it is.
So meanwhile, because these parties are entrenched in their values, and and the Democrats in particular really aren't budging, you see the movement, this new movement coming up. That are people paying attention to it or not? Because how are they going to fold that into the Democratic Party, or are they? What are they?
So
what do you think?
There was the No Kings rally, but it's now official through all the reporting through all the bigger cities that it was Pluto Leo generations and some Pluto Virgo. So the old people and white people. Mm-hmm. They were actually a couple of the New York Times photographers and the writers and other places were laughing like, we can't find a black person. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, what? Right? Like they thought they would see more minorities out there too because of the immigration policy. And what you see are just people who have been on the system that's not working, freaking out. So ironically, in America, it's only a small percentage of people on that federal system and rely, but it's the elderly and it's the baby boomer, the largest generation. Mm-hmm. And so this is their Pluto opposition moment. Right? It's like, sorry. And that was the Pluto opposition moment of everybody who, in the French Revolution, that was really rich and aristocratic. They all had Pluto Leos and the beginnings of Pluto Virgo. And that was like, sorry, that your little system don't work no more. Because what I think is about to happen is like, this is moving now into realizing, well, 67% of our debt in America is to give out these benefits of Social Security and Medicare. And then, of course, Obamacare and stuff like that. So when you actually look at it, it's like, oh, man, I think what they'll do is they'll cut it off at a date. Like, okay, if you're on Social Security now, you'll get the rest of your life, but everybody won't pay into it anymore, and everybody that's not on it, you're not getting it.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know what you were taught in your civics class, but I was always taught by my cynical civics teacher in high school, Social Security won't be there for you, so don't plan on it.
Right, and it's true. I mean, by 2032, it's gone. There's no way.
So anyway, I mean, not that I'm gleefully happy about it, but it's not, what is so crazy about our country is that you can hear these things your whole life. Like our whole lives, we hear all of these horrible things that are going to happen, and then no one solves the problem. No one moves to solve the issue because it's what ends up getting people elected for life, is to have these issues never being solved. And I feel like that's the real issue with kingliness, is the people who don't give up control, and they don't invite other people in. And instead, they're willing to go protest these ideas and these values based on their childhood, I guess. Like, oh, well, I never got to march with Martin Luther King Jr.
Right.
I'm being so opinionated. I'm sorry. But yeah, it's kind of like they're reliving these moments that they think, okay, I'm going to be the glorious one now. But it's basically not wanting to surrender to something new.
Yeah, because there's the interesting thing about what's happening in American civil unrest at the moment is there's no direction, or there's no point to it. It's just F you, Trump. I don't like what's happening to other people or me, but really none of those people are caring about you who's out there protesting, right? But in America, what makes it different, and why I think it's kind of America's saving grace, is that Americans have always never trusted the government. We always have seen the government fail, and so since the beginning of this country, it was embedded for us to never trust the government. It's in all the founding fathers' reason to build our government, so it's always embedded in us. And then if things fail, we don't freak out to the nines. We figure it out. We're a country that has to figure it out locally a lot, right? So, and that's how it was up until like really the last like 80, 70 years, this idea of like bailing out a city because a tornado went through, like the biggest thing in Congress in the 19th century was Davy Crockett when he was in the House and he was trying to vote because there was a big fire in Washington, D.C., and he was trying to vote to have funds allocated to clean it up. And another congressman went to Davy Crockett and went, all right, so when another place has a fire, are you going to vote for that till we have no money? Like, so when somebody dies, are we going to pay for their funeral? Are we going to, right? Like, so Davy Crockett learned really quick when he became a congressman and wrote about it that America was never built to go fix everybody's problem with money. And that's the problem in America right now, is there's a lot of like people who relied on the government's money, which was, it was not constitutional until FDR packed the court. And then the new court of 9 justices became Democrat, and then they reversed the opinion of Social Security, and then FDR put in Social Security. So it was technically never allowed to be, but we went through it anyway because they packed the court.
Right, and at this point, we have generations of people who have only known that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the issue, where it could be similar to what France was like. You have generations of people who only know you have a monarch who's supposed to take care of everything, so your anger is going to be directed at the monarch when something goes wrong, right? That's what they knew. And so now we have generations that have lived always in a world where there are this assistance that comes from the national government. So how do we move out of that or transform it? That's the difficult process. And to me, what's really interesting, I mean, there's a couple of things that are really interesting, that this is happening right now, where these issues are coming up when we're having this astrology that's so similar to the French Revolution. So we wonder, well, what part does America play in it this time? And then another aspect of it that looks really crazy is how Trump is redesigning or creating this new ballroom and the way he's been bringing in this decor in the White House that looks so French. That's about,
Right.
being like Versailles, basically. Like, we need a big ballroom. We need to have gold artifacts everywhere. It's really, it's so crazy how these echoes, like you said for our title, they're coming back in even without people knowing it. It's just so crazy how that's how history works with astrology.
The only difference, though, is that it's the people's house. He's not living there for the rest of his life.
No, that's true.
Right, and then it's also that anybody who becomes president can make the Oval Office look however they want to.
Or the East Wing.
Or Obama.
And it was FDR who also created the bunkers and made what was there
there's
before
so
that.
many changes that happen. So, but what's different about it, and I mean, even if you don't agree with it, and I don't think it's a good look either, there is that part where Trump's not a king, and he's not, right? There's all these people who use the White House, and it's the people's house, and it will always be the people's house. So it's kind of like, it kind of just doesn't hit. And that's the thing about America, is that we went through a Great Depression, which is another good example of like the French Revolution, and we didn't go kill each other.
Right.
And we had soup lines and right, we had all that stuff, and America held it together.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's where it's kind of like, and America used to be taxed a lot, like the Europeans. So the tax rate for an American was super high.
When?
Just like, back during the Great Depression,
But I mean, we
that.
didn't have the income tax until
right, but
when, like, for a really long time.
There were taxes, but then once the income tax came out, like, especially businesses and stuff, like, it was in the 40s and 50%.
Right.
Which is what Europe does now, and it didn't do anything good here. So now it's the lowest it's been in like a century. So at least like in America, if you actually think about it, it's doing the opposite of the French Revolution. It's actually lowering the taxes, right? It's lowering the drug prices. It's trying to get rid of the programs that aren't working and firing the people in the government. Whereas what you're seeing in Europe is the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, not to say that America's not going to have some issues, but they're not going to be even close to the issues in Europe. Plus Europe, the European Union is a Scorpio, and now Pluto's in Aquarius and starting to square everything in Scorpio. So what you're going to see is a fall of the European Union, and then each individual country having to pick themselves up and then reorganize their whole structure politically. And that kind of goes with the French Revolution, is like, we're no more monarch, and then we're kind of ruling ourselves, and we kind of want an empire. We want a leader.
So there's going to be a new Napoleon?
Yeah, that comes a little later, but yeah.
I mean, I was wondering if there's any similarity between now and 1948 or so, when the United States adopted the Marshall Plan in Europe to reconstruct after World War II.
No, that's coming, but not for a while. That's all Uranus, Cancer, Pluto, Leo, stuff like that.
Yeah, I was just wondering if that might be our way to revisit the era of the French Revolution when we didn't participate.
America doesn't really do it. Pluto in Aquarius, America doesn't do much after the war. It sets up the Constitution and it ratifies that. We have our first president, and it just kind of cruises. Doesn't do anything big.
Culturally, we had the Great Awakening, or Second Great Awakening, those sorts of things.
Yeah,
and we're kind of heading in that direction.
Like what America's going to do.
Yeah,
is it's just going to be kind of in its own world, doing its own thing, and everybody figuring shit out and
hosting parties in the big ballroom.
We're out of the scary transits for America. But we're seeing the aftermath of them still, but you're seeing the aftermath being the dismantling of a lot of programs and the over waste, and the people going to have to rely less on the government. And then it's getting back to like Pluto Aquarius, where the government doesn't even get together a lot, right? So like they would go months without the House even coming together. And now you're seeing that with the shutdown, right? The House doesn't even get into session. But that's actually more normal in history than what we're used to like the last 100 years.
Right.
So we're getting back to that, to where you're not going to be able to rely on the government for much, except protection and military and basic.
Well, you should be able to rely on your local government or your state government to do more. But then we also have this situation where states are trying to take on other states by the propositions being proposed in their own states.
Neptune, yeah.
It's just so odd to hear in California, to turn on the TV and see an ad for Proposition 50. And the rationale is, Texas is doing this, so we're going to do this. It's so strange to see.
Well, Schwarzenegger came on, and he's against it, of course. And he laid out, it's ripping up the Constitution in California and then saying it's a temporary thing, but nothing is temporary in government, right? When they say it's right?
Never.
And then what happens is in 2030, then they reassess and go, are other states still doing it? Oh, they are? I guess we keep it going.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's only going to give 5 seats. Although it's going to make it to have any Republicans in California very difficult. Right? Whereas like, that's what actually the only states that do that are liberal states. Massachusetts, there's no Republican representatives, even though 40% of the state votes Republican. So there's like 4 liberal states where there's half the people who vote, but they don't get represented. So it's kind of the weirdest thing to see, because even like what Texas is doing isn't edging out all Democrats, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what you see in liberal states is they've gerrymandered, or Illinois, they've gerrymandered for the longest.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Schwarzenegger brought that up, CNN was kind of like, well, they didn't know what to say. Because it's been going on for a long time. Mm-hmm. And it was always the Democrats doing it.
Yeah.
And then that's the other thing is there's the voting act that made it about different minorities getting represented, but that's the Supreme Court is looking at that, which most likely will be taken away, right? Because it's not the same anymore.
Right.
Right? If anything, if you follow that, then you would need more white representation. And whites don't want that, and whites aren't, and they're not going to let that happen. Right?
Right.
So that's where the Neptune Aries Civil War thing, and it was always about states pitting against each other. And unfortunately, California, if it does pass it, it does look like it will end up turning into a place that will have to have some intervention that won't be nice. Because 45% of Californians don't believe in this stuff. And then a lot of the ballots, they show if you vote no in some of the counties. And even there was a sheriff in San Luis Obispo County who just came up and said, there's a whole voter fraud thing happening right now here. Just in the last couple of days.
That
like the way that the ballots are done and the way that they're having illegals vote, and it's all a sham. So we'll see what happens, but I think in the larger part, the bigger question is Europe.
Yeah.
And I think you have to follow the money, you have to follow the trade, you have to follow how people are. And in America, we get too kind of caught up in this kind of hyperbolic, Neptunian media obsession with pitting against each other. But at the end of the day, it's not as bad. It's bad, but it's not as bad as Europe. And then people in America have to remember they're the 1% of the world. So the average American and their salary is the 1% of the world. And so there's more here to have and to experience and to live with, even with the stuff we've got going on, than anywhere in the world. It doesn't even come close. Most people don't even get the opportunities to even have the stuff that we have here. So
Right.
I think that's where it kind of gets scary for Europe, is it's being choked out. There's no innovation. The trade policies are bad. The government locally is bad. And there really can't be local governments because of the EU, because the formal governments that are central of those have to look over, kind of like how Henry with the Pope had to. You have to look at the EU as like a church, because it's like, nope, elections and different countries rotating who's the center of the power, like Hungary is right now.
It's kind of
Right,
like
so
the Holy Roman Empire.
Right. So it's very bad, and it's not going to go well. And that's why the United Kingdom did Brexit. They saw this coming. So you're going to see more countries leave. And that'll make Europeans, I think, go really weird, because I think what happens is the promises, there's big promises made, and they're not going to be kept. America will go through that, but America's used to that. The government always says they're going to do it, and then they don't.
Mm-hmm.
And America is used to that.
Right.
And we don't rely on the government, except a very few, like 4 to 5 million people that are obsessed. And those are the people at the rallies. They all are teachers' unions. And that's also the thing that comes crushing down with, after Uranus leaves Aries into Taurus, right? Is like the union workers all get screwed during the Great Depression. So, and then they all end up, their kids or themselves end up in World War II.
But they're making the products. They were good workers making all of our great machinery.
Their wives are the ones replacing them at the factory while they were at the war. So unions, Pluto and Aquarius is the end of unions too, right? So it's the dismantling of the union worker.
Yeah, it was
Because the
Pluto.
unions
Yeah.
aren't going to be able to compete with robots. The SAG union couldn't fight AI. It acted like it did. Mm-hmm. It didn't help one actor. There's no actor that's happy right now. They all left. There's no more business even in Hollywood. They didn't save anything. Didn't protect over anything. So if you just follow the trail, it's like, oh yeah, and then guess who's the number one supporter of Prop 50? California's Teachers Union.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're teaching about gerrymandering.
Right. Correct. That they want it because they want their free health care and all their benefits.
But it's California. You'll still have that. It will still be.
And did you know who led the charge for SNAP and the idea of food stamps was California in 1937. And they had a booklet. I could probably show it to people. It's crazy. It was this idea of ham and eggs. Mm-hmm. Free ham and eggs. So it all started with ham and eggs.
Green ham and eggs?
No, but it's kind of interesting that the food stamp story was based off. We have extra agriculture in California that we could get rid of, right? But then it really kind of turned into, no, let's create SNAP and let's make it and turn it into money. And now, I remember when EBT came out, I'm like, this thing ain't going to last. That was an Obama thing, right? And that was like in the middle of Saturn Scorpio and all that. I remember doing the astrology back then. Mm-hmm. I remember being like, this is not going to end up well. It's very European Union based. Anything Scorpio, European Union, EBT. I always knew Pluto and Aquarius would be the end of all those systems. So scorpionic systems are going to die, which are, what can I get from you? Taurus is, I have to build it myself. Scorpio is, what do you got for me? You got the loan? You got the extra money? You got the EBT? What's in it for me? Like, what's my inheritance? I put into this. Sorry, it's a big scam. too. Scorpio always deals with financial scams. So the biggest financial scam is you've been paying into a system, and we've been using your money for other things and writing IOUs, and we don't have that money to pay you. And it's going to be, I think, hard with all this Pisces finishing out for people to understand that in America or even Europe, that none of these countries, around the world, have the money to pay for all this stuff. They're done. Right. Like, you just have to do basic Uranus and Gemini is like cutting through the BS with facts. And so it's like the facts are the money ain't there. It never was there. Don't expect it. That's the hard part about Pluto and Aquarius, is then people latch on to causes that they think are here to help the people. But if it's a Pluto-based thing, like what we're receiving, it goes bad. Because what happens in the French Revolution, their guns get taken away. Their swords get taken away. It becomes bloody streets for years. And then they don't really get what they want at the end.
No. That's the thing to remember, that,
right?
that there was all this pressure to conform to the one group that, eventually other groups were falling away. Everybody becomes like the Jacobins. They unite their culture, they develop their idea of who are the national heroes we're going to celebrate, all of that, and then they start to turn on each other, and that falls apart. So even the state getting behind this effort to create a new uniform culture that would be representative of one person's idea of the Enlightenment or a few people's ideas, it didn't work. And Napoleon had to come in, and things changed from that.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes. It becomes fire and mayhem in the streets with the troops and the citizens.
Oh, you don't have a guillotine picture?
Oh, I hope you have some good guillotine pics.
Let me find it. I was looking at other pictures.
Because the ones that I'm finding are, of course, like liberty out in the with the people, and okay, there's freedom, but what are you guys going to do with it, right?
The death penalty abolitionists who invented the guillotine. I mean, that's not a good picture. It's very sterilized. I mean, but that is the idea of killing by the guillotine, was democratic execution. Everybody deserves to have a quick and easy execution, even if you're an enemy of the state. So it's being depicted very uniformly and very Pluto and Aquarius mythology. I don't know how you would describe it, because you're saying Pluto and Aquarius, you're not all supposed to be the same, but they were all applying the same execution to everybody.
Yeah, I found like a little treasure trove of guillotine pics.
Treasure trove of guillotine pics.
Yeah.
Now, who's putting this poster on their wall, by the way? This was at a poster's
Marie Antoinette's
website.
execution, October 16th, 1793.
Mm-hmm.
That's still Pluto and Aquarius.
Now, while all this is happening in France, what's happening in England is the Industrial Revolution, and work conditions are not good for people. That's the other thing I was thinking of when you were talking, is that when you said that it's the death of the unions, work conditions are the worst for people at this time in the new industrializing society.
Yeah, and it just is not, it's not about right? So Pluto and Aquarius, anything communist or communal doesn't work.
But it's always being portrayed as this is going to be the era of it.
That's Pluto. It's the seduction. It's the woman in Amsterdam on the red light district in the window.
The communist woman.
Right, but when you get in
Amsterdam.
there, are you sure she's as good looking? Right? No. So that's why, that's Pluto Aquarius does really good for not allowing kind of communist or even like people trying to create their own utopia through death and killing. It doesn't go well. I mean, look at Israel now, right? Like, it's not going good for them. Here's a good one too. Yeah, this one's an official one.
Yeah, they never show where all the bodies are. I was just searching.
Well, I like this
for
one
it.
with the head off, right?
Yeah.
But with all these people and just get in your little, we're trawling you in a little trailer to get your head chopped off.
And meanwhile, how many heads do you need to see in a day? Are the people even watching anymore? It's all the military around. I mean, because it was just set up and it happened from dawn till dusk.
Yeah, well, I was gonna look at French Revolution and all the guns and swords seized. That people forget that they were seizing the people's weapons, and that becomes like the weird part of all of it is, I guess I'm going to have to use the seizure of arms like muskets, swords, and cannons occurred during major events such as the storming of the Bastille and the September massacres. Weapons were taken by revolutionaries to defend against perceived loyalist threats, and later were also confiscated from citizens deemed counter-revolutionary. Before marching on Bastille prison for gunpowder, a Parisian crowd of 80,000 people first raided the hotel and invaded the armory, seizing 30,000 muskets. After storming the Bastille, they seized the cannons and the large supply of gunpowder. Arming citizens, seizing weapons was a critical step in transforming the citizens. And then there was a day of daggers with the confiscation of arms. So that's when the nobles armed with concealed weapons gathered at, what's that, Tuileries
The
Palace?
Tuileries Palace.
To defend King Louis, and the National Guard disarmed them and confiscated their weapons. And then the massacres of September and August 1792, the atmosphere of paranoia and fear that preceded the massacre. Justice Minister George Danton ordered a search of every house in Paris for weapons and munition, in which were called domiciliary visits. Danton's men seized personal firearms and arrested thousands of people considered to be traitors. This is where it's such a bipolar, oh, we seized the Bastille, we've got all these weapons, we're going to win. And then, no, we're seizing him all later.
Right. Or the idea that you're a traitor, you're an enemy of the people, therefore we'll seize your weapons. But who's determining who is the enemy of the people, right?
Right.
And it keeps shifting.
Yeah, and it doesn't work out in the end. That's the crazy part.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually an interesting article. Intoxication in the French Revolution. It's very Pluto. It's very obsessed with getting a result, and then it becomes kind of Pluto has its own habits, right? So even if it's alcohol, that's more Neptunian. But if you really just think of like the coming together to be part of something is more what Pluto and Aquarius is. And really it's people like with these wounds that they don't realize, and so they're just really getting together to kind of party and like say fuck it and be rebels. But it doesn't really work. It's not, there's no formulation. And the irony about America is that was Pluto Capricorn. That it started in Pluto Capricorn, right? So the ones that start in Pluto Aquarius fail. You're too late. The other thing I was thinking about chart-wise is that we're about to see the Jupiter opposite Pluto on July 20th, 2026. Uranus is involved because Uranus is going to be in trine to Pluto. It's going to be sextile over to Jupiter. So we're going to be seeing also Neptune at 4 degrees. Everything's at 4, outer planet-wise with Jupiter. Back in the French Revolution, if I go back, you'll see that Uranus is involved. as Jupiter and Uranus get ready to conjunct, right? So Jupiter and Uranus conjunct, right? And so you got to look at Jupiter trine Uranus and then dealing with aspects to Pluto. So Jupiter and Uranus come together while Pluto's in the opposite sign. So even though ours is a lot more like, I know a lot of astrologers out there are like, ooh, it's going to be really, really great. It depends on where you're at in the world, right? And I think that with the Uranus and Gemini aspect of things, you know, it could be more talk than walk. Like maybe people talk, but then they don't have the guts to really pull the guns out this time or something like that. But I think that, you know, it's kind of funny because as they're going against very Leo energy, they're accessing Leo energy to go after it and saying, no, this is what I deserve. Like, and that my heart's in this and I'm passionate about it. And I think that, you know, it's not going to be fun for a lot of people in places where you're locked into a social system.
Locked into a social system, meaning what?
Where the government's in control of too many affairs. Because that's what the French Revolution is. And America, you're watching the dismantling of the government, and that's why people are freaking out. And that's the irony, is that means I'm feeling good about America. Nothing bad's going to happen. The bad things are happening in all these European countries. No money's coming in there. They're falling apart. The European Union has no sway, so they rely on NATO because America's in that contract. Mm-hmm. And then America's already, with Trump, like, you need to pay more, motherfuckers. Right? And then so they're having to keep, that's their last bet they got. And it's only on war. Mm-hmm. There's no innovation. You don't hear anything out of European leaders about innovating with new technologies, space anymore, anything, nothing. It's just dead. But in America, we got automated cars, we got space going on, we got AI, we got too many things to even name. America's going to be fine. And Pluto and Aquarius only, like, really that's what it's about, is like trying new things and doing things differently and being innovative. If you invest in that, then it will pay back good. But forming in cults and running up against people doesn't turn out good. So, and that's weird because the people who are doing that now are all upset because the government's being dismantled. Yet in the French Revolution, they would have died for that. That's what they went to go do.
Right.
So that's why I'm not worried about the gray-haired Pluto Leo people that are out there thinking they're starting a revolution when they have nothing that they're going after. It's just gripe. It's just like their griefs. And RFK. Oh my God, you're going to take away my vaccine.
Oh.
Right?
I was like RFK. I was thinking of RFK, the first one.
It's like oh my God, like you need to be able to have all these benefits. It's all about benefits. Benefits are all Pluto. Benefits are all Scorpio. Right? But the real term benefic is with Venus and Taurus. And the benefit of life is your talent, the work you do, and what you harvest to get back from the work you do yourself. Not through your Bitcoin, your markets. That's how I know this is going to go bad, because I was thinking about this in the car today, actually. I was like, gosh, this is like the Great Depression about to happen with the markets and what's happening and the debt, the war is about to happen. It's just like, the only option is to just collapse it all. And people are like so heavily invested in, I'm going to be rich because somehow the government, I invested a little bit of money and I'm just going to get 400x that. You see that everywhere. Everybody, and that's what happened in the 20s. Everybody had stock. Right? People have stock that don't even realize they do have 401ks in America. Mm-hmm. And so when more people have stock than not, or crypto in this case now too, that's the sign when it's all about to blow up. Because everybody's just like, I don't want to work. I just want a little bit of money and to give me a lot of money back. And that's not how the universe works. The universe just didn't, God didn't build the world in 7 days. Right? What? So, right, like that's the idea of like creation. Or a redwood tree in the California forest, like hundreds of years old, that just didn't jack in the beanstalk. Right? And then that's where you see Ozempic or things like that. Like that's this Pluto and Aquarius squaring a Scorpio, right? This instant gratification to change radically. Like I don't want to have to go through the hard work of losing weight. I just want to take a shot and it just happens. And that's turning out bad, right? So everything that's instant, everything that's scorpionic, investments, venture capital, all these things that people are attached to, benefits, Social Security, receiving back with something that was put in that wasn't you really putting in anything, right? That's all going to be a hand grenade in everybody's face. So, and you know what? That's what the Americans went through after the Revolutionary War. The American dollar was worth, the continental money was worth nothing.
Right.
Then they just started with a new dollar. Ironically, the same as a dollar and a stamp was commerce, and so we're going to get back to like basics, not over intricacies of which crypto are you using and what that, it looks like that. That's very Pluto. That ain't going to be what it is. So I don't even think about that stuff anymore because it's like, it's bad news now. And it's all debt money that was converted. So all they did was have people feel like they're going to get, it's like basically like Toys R Us or no, not Toys R Us, like Chuck E. Cheese. You turned all of your cash into Chuck E. Cheese dollars here.
Well, you still got some good things.
I can get so much. Look I can get all the sour tarts I can get, the sweet tarts, and I can get all these little things and toys. And then you leave there like, never using this. They used to do baseball cards, remember, like the little quarter machine, and then you would get a baseball card with a piece of gum, and the gum didn't have anything left in it when you ate it.
Right.
It broke in your mouth. That's what's about to happen to everybody that's expecting some outside thing to give you returns.
But do you see then a huge crash, or what do you think is going to happen to people?
I think it's more government, people, anything that's if you already could just watch ever since Pluto officially stayed in Aquarius. It's just been U.S. aid gone. Pluto is the destroyer, right? So what is it doing? Anything that's aid related, Aquarian, this whole humanity give kind of thing. Now it's SNAP benefits. All these humanitarian things are dying.
And why? What should it be replaced by?
Pluto's going to come and kill those things.
I mean, so it's like a cycle, right? Where Pluto is coming in to do this work because things die and then they're reborn. So what becomes reborn out of Pluto and Aquarius?
So you could use the Antasia, or you could look at it just in the place it's in. It reminds me, if you have to teach somebody how to fish, you can't do it for them.
Yeah.
That Pluto and Aquarius is the realization that you just can't, like Uranus just can't. Well, that's the story of Uranus, right? Everybody expected him to be there, but Saturn overthrows him, and the world gets dark, and Uranus doesn't just bounce back. That you deal in the story of Kronos and Uranus, that Uranus is not reliable, right? And he's the god of the air and the skies. And so it's like people almost look to it like God-like being, and that's where I think a lot of the churches and even in all religions of the world give this idea of piety and giving, and that's the idea of like you really being at your best. It's very Aquarian. Ironically, though, it's not what God's doing the same way, because Uranus that rules that isn't God. He's close to God, but he's not God. And so people want to be close, and that's the closest thing is like, I donated my clothes. I feel like a good person. I helped go to a rally and protect illegal immigrants so they could still keep getting free benefits and not pay $1. I'm doing my due diligence. I'm feeling that makes me feel closer to God. Well, Pluto comes by and goes, that's not actually what God does. Sorry. Right? So Hades is pulling people actually into the underworld through those places, ironically. Because if you see what actually happened, all the churches were funding the immigrants coming over the last 3 years. Right? So actually the ideas of how we give are not in the monetary Pluto sense anymore. So the idea too is, well, Trump's going to save the day and we're all going to get rich because we all invest in crypto and he's opening the crypto markets. It's like the dollar's dead. The world currencies are dead. This is just the banks investing and creating and allowing these things to happen that also hedge and move those markets because everybody's losing more than winning. So they get as much cash to move to whatever new system it is. So it's all rigged. Anything Pluto is rigged, and it's against the people. So you just don't buy into those things. You don't expect the government to come and help you. You don't expect to get rich because the government's doing things to make you rich. And you don't get lost in social justice shit that really doesn't have like a meaning behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So, unless it started in Pluto and Capricorn.
Okay.
But it doesn't play out long. Like we're already getting close to where Pluto was at the end of the Revolutionary War in the next year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So we're already at, and you can already feel it where it's like the tide's turned. America's coming back to America. It doesn't want to do woke. It doesn't want to do this. The family, because it's a cancer country, is a centerpiece again. People are wanting to have kids. People are wanting to just live their lives again. They're not wanting to be famous. They're just wanting to have a good, enjoyable life. And people are turning that way. So that's a good thing. That's where it's going. And I think for people who have a utopian view, which is ironically to bring back Thomas More,
Yeah.
they don't make it. Because ironically, Pluto in Aquarius comes, and Thomas More doesn't make it through the first couple degrees of
No, he
Pluto
doesn't.
in Aquarius. So all the utopians, ironically, literally in history with Neptune and Aries and Pluto Aquarius, die. And so what you're seeing is the systems of utopian ideas dying. That's history too.
Yeah, I was thinking that, we had talked just the other day, we were talking about the Golden Age and Elizabeth I and her Golden Age. And that would be interesting to look at next time, I think, would just be, because we're actually having more of that astrology. When we get into Pluto and Aquarius, it's more Elizabeth. I mean, she's born in that transit, and that's maybe where we'd be headed as a society, but it
means that, the person who is going to be around that's going to really change things was born in the last year.
Yeah.
That's what the history says, is that when you're looking out, and is it this person? Is it that? Is none of the people we're looking at right now? If anything, we get taught that Edward is not anything. He causes a little bit of problems, but it gets fixed in a week.
Edward.
Right after Henry dies, his son Edward.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Right.
So we're...
Because he's not monarch. He's young.
Mm-hmm.
He makes choices to go with Lady Jane Grey because of his mom and her family and his uncles who are all connected to that, right? And so it doesn't work out. And Mary gets put in. And so like the person that you're not suspecting and who you think would be good, because then the country feels good, like, oh, it's a tutor, actually is like the worst person in. Right. Worse than Henry. Like Henry actually cared more about his people than Mary did. Mary was had a chip on her shoulder from her mom. She also waited too long to get married.
She's married to the enemy's king.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the rival powers monarch.
But like she waits too long.
Yeah.
Right. She's a virgin and has to play that game for a long time. And then she stays Catholic because of her mom. And it becomes just bad.
But a lot of people were happy. I mean, if you were Catholic and you had been hiding your faith in England, you were happy that you could be open with it. And it was a time of vengeance. So you got to see a lot of Protestants being executed. And I mean, so for certain segments of the population, it was like, oh, we're finally in our golden era. And then Elizabeth comes and regulates it,
Yeah, so it's almost like Pluto Aquarius seduces you, and then you think, this is where we're going in the future, and then no, something tries to pull it back. Aquarian's very back to the future, Pluto. It's very much like you're on the DeLorean, and it's like, wait, what's his name in the movie? Bud or whatever?
I don't remember any of their names. You mean Michael J. Fox? Or?
No, the bad guy in that movie.
Oh, yeah.
Buzz or whatever his name is president.
Crispin Glover. I can't remember.
It's like if he becomes president, it's like, wait, what? But like going back to the 50s and, oh, he's got the magazine, right? Like it's very much like we're going forward. No, we're not. We're going back. But it doesn't last long, the idea that we're going back, and then it goes way forward.
Right.
And that's what's ironic about Elizabeth, because the golden era there was financial, but it was more about how the country set itself up. More than like the people like obsessed with money. The people were actually like able to kind of feel free for the first time and not look over their shoulder. So. Yeah. And the Renaissance period is blooming. And so people are actually doing things, and it's a nice era because you're not being kind of choked out with what you need to be. That's really what the golden era is. And that's what's sad, is that it's being touted now, but nothing close to what Elizabeth was like is being put out there. Especially with Christian nationalism and stuff. It's like the opposite. Right? Elizabeth didn't care if you were Catholic or, if you were, she didn't spend her time in having her men going after every single person. And that's kind of the paranoia of Henry, is everybody's not trustworthy. You're too Protestant, That's what happens to Cromwell. You're too Protestant.
Yeah.
You're talking to too many Lutheran people, even though you're running my government better than Wolsey did. But you're also too much. So that's ironic. It's like Thomas More goes away. Thomas Cromwell gets killed too. And both are the far extremes of left and right.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you see under Henry VIII is what a very famous historian called the Tudor Revolution in government. I mean, it was its own type of revolution. It was, I would say, just as transformative as the American Revolution was breaking away from Britain, or what the French Revolution was trying to do. And what Henry VIII was trying to navigate was, how do we set up this new type of government that's going to be disconnected from the church, where we're going to have the religious arm be part of our state? So that's all brand new, and we're going to confiscate all these lands. What are we going to do with them? Who's going to profit? Who will be the new landed aristocracy that we create with this new land, right? And how will I do all of this while at the same time there are all these fanatics who are still super Catholic and they don't want me on the throne? And, you know, he had to figure out this legal strategy to be able to do it, but then how do you implement it? How do you execute the right people, right? It's very Machiavellian in a way, and he was using kind of all of the best ideas about new ways to govern. I mean, for us, it's not, but for his time, he was creating something totally new.
Yeah, and even like, you know, Jane Seymour, who he married, she was very Protestant, and Anne Boleyn was too. So like, if you watch his series of his wives, they go farther away from Catherine in ideology. And so Anne Boleyn like tosses him in the pool, but Jane Seymour dunks him in it. And then, of course, he gets a sister, not a wife, from the Holy Roman Emperor, right, Catherine, who he doesn't consummate with and isn't attracted to, and they don't have anything in common, but he just goes, "You're my sister now," and is able to annul it because he's in charge of the church.
You mean Anne of Cleves, right?
Or Anne of Cleves, correct,
Yeah.
after Catherine's death, right?
Yeah.
Or Seymour's death, right? Jane Seymour's death. Then it's like, then he goes with the next Catherine, who's the little young one who cheats on him with one of his little, whatever they are, one of his servants, Culpeper, right?
I don't remember his name. So.
Oh yeah, Culpeper.
Okay.
And what's weird is the spy name in the American spies that Washington used was Culpeper, which I always found really weird, because that is relating to Henry's betrayal, right? So the name of the spy is Culpeper, and it's the same last name as the betrayal in the letter that was found, right? Because there's evidence that she was cheating on him. She was young, though, too.
Yeah.
And she was a prostitute before she was married to Henry.
She was very flirtatious.
Right? But she doesn't even care about... She actually says at the end in the Tower of London, she's like, I don't even know what to say to God because I don't talk to God. So she wasn't even religious. But she also was grown up as a prostitute in her, like, 12 years old. So... But it's kind of funny if you follow like the wives he's with, they're like all leading him away from the Catholic Church. There's even after that where he goes and hangs out with the fool for like a year and doesn't come out after the death of Jane Seymour. And he just hangs out with his knights and plays cards and shit, and throws dice, and hangs out with the fool.
Well, the fool is always the wisest
right?
one.
So I think that's where we're at, is like, it's not going to look like what anything's being projected that you're going to receive, you're not going to get. By not just institutions, but whatever is about the people. Like, you're not going to get it. The people realize with Pluto that you just have each other to help each other out. And that's why it's a water bearer. You got to get up and work. And the elixir of the water that comes through is the higher kind of like spiritual mystery water. But it's not about the water. It's about bearing the air. The air sign quality is actually he's sitting on a cloud, right? And so it's also the idea of like air and water and the elements. The air part of it being a view above, and where do I put the water? Where do I actually put it? Or I used to always say in my young days as an astrologer, like, if you were to be the water bearer, there's only so much water. So the person that's getting the water, you can't be like, can I get a refill?
Right. So it's all over, basically?
The
There
idea
is
of
no
the
more?
refill is over.
Okay. But,
Right.
So in the French Revolution then, things might have gone differently if after they deposed the king, or maybe even the king could have done this. The idea would have been everybody comes together and takes a look at what resources do we have, right? If they're going to have a centralizing impulse in the French Revolution, they had that eventual committee on public safety. Let's say it got there, and then they say, okay, people, we've all come together. Who has what? Where can you contribute your talents? France needs to be rebuilt. What we need to pull out of all these wars, or we need to figure out who can fight them and finish them. Would it have been more like all the people should have come together with their different gifts or talents, or they could have stayed wherever they were, but just try to figure out how to make it work with what you have without trying to completely annihilate the other side and take all the power. Right?
Yeah, because what was in America didn't push the Aquarian thing too far. It's about freedom. So they got their freedom. It wasn't enough. The idea to them was freedom equals me getting what these people had, and I need it too.
In France, you're saying?
Yeah.
Or?
Right, because it's like it's more than just to free themselves of what the government's done, and it's also a payback, and that payback is your luxuries I must also have, but not all the people can have all those luxuries, because if you look at how resources around the world work, there's not enough resources for everybody to have those. Like, that's why Aquarian rules the water bearer, right? Like, there's only so much water. So everybody has a cup. Here's your freedom, and you got water. You're not going to die. But people in Aquarius with Pluto, when they start wanting more, which is very Pluto, right? I want more. I need more of that freedom. I need more water, and I also need what's fair back to me. So, like, the idea of like Uranus isn't the one that comes back into power by his own. Jupiter, his grandson, is the one that does. And so he sits down on the throne and becomes, and sets up and gets rid of the Titans and becomes the Olympian gods. So Uranus then just goes back to be the old man. He doesn't try to restore himself in a way that's more. He just goes and walks back like the hermit up top. And Jupiter becomes the Olympian god. So the idea that, oh, this has happened, this is bad, Saturn's come in, Kronos, we're going to have to do all this stuff. It's not none of it's going to work out. The idea, like, unless you're just getting to do the basic of like what freedom is. Like, it's like getting out of jail. Like, oh, I'm getting out of jail, but I want to go to the saloon, and I don't like that they have all that whiskey over there, and I don't like that they have cash and that they're being able to gamble, and I've been in jail for the last 3 years. So I'm going to go shoot these people up, and it doesn't work out. Aquarius, you can't ask for much. You're lucky. The biggest benefit that Pluto will make people realize is that you're lucky you're a human being. You're lucky that you're a human being that's free to do what you want. That's the only thing that Pluto will deliver. And that's what you see in America. That's what it was. It was just the idea of freedom was everything, and that was it. It wasn't about what the government is going to give you. It was about what the government wasn't going to take away from you. right? That was it. It was about that you get to go do whatever you want, and we're not going to be in your grill. And we're not going to promise you anything but that you have all the rights to be free. That's it. And defense, and that's it. There was no other guarantees. So when you're going for more than just that basic, then failure. So anybody that's going to try to restore the government and all the programs are going to just lose. They will be gone. And America in the next 18 years will look like it did at the beginning of the 19th century with Thomas Jefferson. You're not being taxed. States are just running themselves, and there's a national defense, and people get together for that, and yeah, there's not much else going on. And that's where innovation really comes from, right? Is you have to go figure that out.
Right.
Because actually people who rely on the government and subsidies or all these things that they get from the government or EBT, they're actually not in a creative form at all. They're not innovating at all because it's this reliance. It's like, I'm relying on the water to keep coming to me. I don't know how to go get the water myself.
Right. And in that system, politicians they also don't have to innovate. It's just, all right, that already exists. We can, that's something we can depend upon. We're going to get those votes or whatever it is. So you see people fighting for the system to stay the same. First of all, yes, because it will be bad if it's taken away from people who really need it, right? But beyond that, the people who didn't do anything about it, trying to fix the whole system if they wanted it to stay, they also didn't innovate ever. No. You know what I mean? So now what are they going to do without their support? If it gets, and what's happening right now is their answer is, well, we're not going to play anymore. We're not participating. I don't even know what's going on. Like this strategy right now is the weirdest thing. Like shut down the government. Okay.
No, and that's causing the problems they're complaining about. But at the same time, that's kind of what's ironic is Republicans since Social Security have tried to privatize it for a long time because they saw on the writing on the wall, it's impossible. It worked at the baby boom because there were so many, it was 3 to 4 kids per household. So those are workers. And the Fed is connected to Social Security with the Federal Reserve and all the federal notes that are put out. It's all based upon that agreement of GDP, people at work, and interest rates. We're in upside down in all 3 of those areas now. And there's only less than, it's 1.6, 1.4, the average kid now per woman in America, which you can't sustain. Social Security was meant for people to be at that 2.934. Because for every 3 workers, 1 person should be on Social Security, and now it's the opposite. Now it's for every 2 to 3 people on Social Security, there's only 1 worker paying enough money into Social Security to fund it. And so that's not privatized. Those days are gone. We had the opportunity to privatize it for the last 30 years to save it. That's gone now. So as an astrologer, I've said it's gone. Anybody who's hoping for it to stay is just kind of in crazy town. So really, people just kind of go crazy over that, but then they'll realize, oh, okay. But if you're in Europe, it's like you're all reliant on that system of reliance on the government and healthcare and all that stuff. And so no, there is not going to be a global healthcare initiative. There's not going to be a Canada, America, or any of these countries anymore with these government-involved healthcare. It's all going to disappear. That's going to be the mountain that breaks.
As long as they don't set up a guillotine, we'll be okay, maybe. As long as they don't bring back the guillotine.
Well, think about in France, during the Bastille, right? They had to go break in there to go get arms.
Right.
What's the only country that has more guns than people? America. Americans don't have to go raid a military base to get weapons. Every American has a weapon right next door to them, or they have one. So there is not going to be guillotines. Because the second some leftist person comes out, throws a guillotine, tries to throw a rich guy in, poor people, anybody with guns are going to be like, you can't do that, motherfucker. And there's going to be AR-15s, and there's going to be fucking people out there with 30-06, and everybody's going to be like, what the fuck? And those people are going to run away. Right? So that's not going to happen in America. That's why the Second Amendment protects America the most. But in France, it's not like people are like, yeah, I got my gun. In Europe, they're like, guns are the worst thing in the world. Yet now they're begging for guns, and all the money that's going in is for weapons, right? Not for your businesses. While they know they're not going to be able to pay the healthcare and do all that shit, the only way is like, let's hopefully get a war started and steal from Russia and steal from China, and that's what World War II is about, right? Steal from the Germans. Let's take everything, all the innovation, all the money, all the things. And then Henry didn't do big expeditions, like he was very kind of isolated on the island. He didn't send people out to go do big. But the Spanish, they go to Central America and for the Pope, and who ends up with all the shit? The Pope. It's not like the Spain comes back rich, full of gold. That was what Columbus was sold on, and that's what all the Spanish were sold on, was the gold and the wealth. And none of that wealth transferred to Spain.
They did have it for a while, and it actually caused inflation in Europe. So it had this detrimental impact too. But in the end, was it a lasting wealth that they had? No, right?
No, because the Vatican ended up with all of the Aztec and the Incas and all the Mayan knowledge that they say they destroyed, but they didn't, because John Dee's great proof of, no, thanks for the black obsidian that I use, right? So obviously no. And then you have the Pope, who was able to convert all of the people of the Aztec Empire into Catholics, and you see it in Mexico today and all of Central America being the largest Catholic population in the world. 500 years later, that spell worked. And that's the other part of this history, is you're seeing that spell trying to be brought up again. So we can go into that in the next.
Yeah. The spell coming soon.
Any last words?
No, my last words, when you said spell, I thought, oh, Halloween's coming up. We didn't do a Halloween topic, but I guess guillotine kind of is. But it reminds me of our Edgar Allan Poe episode, and we also did one way a long time ago on Lizzie Borden. So I don't know. We missed our opportunity.
I think what's happening right now with us being in between all these big outer planet transits, and this is what happens, is the ghosts become the really big unknown, which right now it's 3A Atlas, it's aliens. Right? So like people aren't worried about ghosts right now. No. They're not worried about zombies, or they're not worried about what we're usually in Halloween about, right? They're actually like, what the fuck's happening up there?
Yeah.
What are these? Are these drones? Are they UAPs? Are they UFOs? Like, why is NASA saying they're shut down and not giving the images of 3A Atlas?
This is, what I was wondering
when
about.
They have them. Right? So that's the Halloween scare.
Yeah. And the other thing to think about, on a lovely, pleasant thought, is if we are in the same astrology of contact between Europe and the New World, right? I mean, there is something similar, because we were thinking of talking about that, the conquest, right?
Yeah.
So I thought of it all of a sudden I've been thinking about it wrong. I guess, like if you think about it from the from the perspective of the Aztecs right now. And the Aztecs were there when this group of unknown people come from Europe, and then they have to fit it into their mental world of who are these people? What's going on? And then they encounter the diseases that decimate them. I started to think, is Three-Eye Atlas this first thing, like the first contact of, we're all trying to make sense of it in our own ways with our existing understandings, and it could be aliens, right? That's one of the ways that we would understand something that's coming from outside of our solar system and seems to have some kind of a force propelling it within, right? That it's not just some pull. We're trying to make sense of it using whatever language and understanding we have.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, it's releasing nickel or whatever it is. We could be getting some sort of new microorganism or whatever you would call it, in the whole solar system.
It's like Montezuma. He didn't have binoculars.
Exactly.
But Montezuma and the Aztec Empire looking out, Montezuma II, and going, what are those boats?
Yeah.
Why are they all not stopping coming here? And then the other part of it is the discovery of the Spanish is this realization that the religion there is blood sacrifice and death sacrifice of people and eating and cannibalism.
And not just
Right.
transubstantiation.
But it's also the irony of the reflection in the mirror of the Catholic Church and eating the body of Christ and drinking the blood of Christ as a ritual.
Mm-hmm.
The sacrifice idea, and that people think it's okay to do that ritual of eating the body and the blood of Christ is, sure, it's not as bad as eating as a cannibal somebody, but that was the irony that we are better than these people, yet we do the same thing and we act out the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
That the
Well, imagine
religions
it
were
from
no
the other
different. And then we
side.
kill people who are Protestant or who are Catholic or whatever. We kill them all.
Well, because they don't believe in our
Right.
sacrifice
Yeah.
in the same way. But then imagine being the people on the other end of that whole thing. So maybe I do have some sort of sacrificial, cannibalistic element to my belief system. So then you have people coming in and telling you, actually, you just need this little wafer. That's good enough. And you're thinking, really? Like, I wonder from the other side, did they see a mirror also? Because to me, that would be a really big stretch to go from this sacrificial religion where you've got humans being sacrificed so that your society will be able to continue on in its path the way it's been. It's not as if I don't think they weren't just sitting there eating people right and left, right? It was, they had their own rituals around that. So now you have this group of people who come in and say, you don't need to do that because some other guy died and did that for you. And now we just remember it with this little cracker or whatever I don't know what they would have thought of it as, right? But it's just like it's totally transforming your world.
The idea of eating a body is giving me power.
Yeah, but I think they would have had to really try hard to convince them of that. Don't you?
Well, yeah, that's why they killed them all and forced people.
Yeah.
And then maybe it wasn't germs that spread it, but the Aztecs eating Spanish people and why they got sick.
Yeah.
That's actually like the new look at it, right? Right? This whole idea of germs is just like a joke.
Right.
That actually the Aztecs were eating to prove to other Spanish Inquisition and armies when they were in battle that don't fuck with us, we're eating you. Because there's written stories of that.
Mm-hmm. And there's visual depictions of it
yeah,
too.
there is. So maybe that's what's weird about 3A Atlas is this realization of like, we think we're this great people, but if we find our origins aren't so great, you know, it makes us look at humanity different. But based off where we're at now with the Pluto still going out of bounds this cycle, humanity will go off the rails again. It is right now. So, and the only way back on the rails is back in Pisces. And that it becomes humble times. But that's where it gets really, it's going to get really weird. But that's, I think, the biggest part of Neptune and Aries with Pluto and Aquarius is it actually brings the churches and religion much more into and then even the Aztecs against Catholicism and the idea of converting them all. It becomes, those are the centerpieces of this transit we're in. And there's no good that comes out of any of it except for leaving a church. Not taking one over and converting. The only net positive you see is from just leaving. That's all you have to, and that the fear of what would happen wasn't as bad. Right? So I think there's going to be people around the world, and there's 8 billion people on the planet, and over half of them are one religion, another half are a couple other religions, and then there's only like a sliver that don't follow religion. So you have like the mass collective that's going to have to learn to let go of a lot of these things because it doesn't end up good. So, I mean, it's cliche, but we started with Charles back at the Vatican. That's not a good sign. Or the Knights Templar back in the Vatican same year, after 800 years. It's not, they're doing something. They're getting ready for something. I think it's a PR thing. Like, they're about to find out the truth. Uh-oh. Right, so... Plus, they're also taking advantage of the Charlie Kirk situation, and they know the astrology of the Pisces and people all converting right now. So it's like we have the most subscribers ever in human history. Let's see how we can sway them as best as we can. You know? Yeah. But it will be like a Daily Wire moment where everybody doesn't watch the Daily Wire anymore and doesn't trust them. That everybody's going to... The churches will become the new Daily Wire. Like, oh, what the fuck are you guys doing?
And you know what's the best symbol for me, or the best metaphor for all of this, is if you take the Pope and Charles and you put them in a setting where they're going to be praying together, they were totally overshadowed by the artwork of the place that they were within. And to me, you know what that says is, we all know the story of the Sistine Chapel and how it got painted, and how Michelangelo, yes, the Pope kind of forced him to do it.
But it didn't pay him well either.
No, and he hated it and he cursed it the whole time. And you can read what he thought, because he had such good records of his experience. But in the end, from his hard work and dedication, he created this beautiful living testament to his own faith combined with his humanity, right? So it's like a coming together of, it's not about the religion of this overall institution that I'm here supporting. It's because it's the Renaissance, right? It's about his inner divine spirit that could make such a beautiful artistic rendering. It's his idea of, it's him. Like, the church couldn't have done that without the artist, is what I'm saying, I guess. And so to me, that gives me hope, right? That if people want to live in the spirit of Pluto and Aquarius, and I think that was being done in Pluto and Capricorn though, right? But that's the spirit to me, is to take those things that you've perfected in your skills or whatever you know is your inner truth, and to put it out in the world and to work hard at doing it. You might be steamrolled over. You might be ignored. I don't know what it is, but there's this lasting legacy that's a person created from their own gifts, not from something that could have been trained by the church, right?
No. And even the depiction that you see in that 16th chapel, of course, with the hands and they're not touching.
But they're almost, it's about like the potential almost.
That's like what keeps everybody subscribed. It's the irony of the reflection that Neptune at the end of Pisces and Aries is like this. It's like Bitcoin, it's like crypto, it's like today if you just look at everything, it's like we're so close to getting it. No, you're not going to get it, right?
Yeah, but it's just the way the church is reading it, right? It keeps you subscribed, but
that you don't get it though.
But zoom back out, and the story's not really about trying to touch the finger. Right. But it is that's like a moment that's about ready to happen that's captured. So if the church wants to live in that moment forever, if the institutionalized church wants to live in this moment that's all about something's going to happen, if you stay in that place forever, nothing's going to happen, right? So let's zoom back out and think about what was the name of the movie? The Sorrow and the Fear, or the movie about Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel. Remember that aspect. Remember the sacrifice, the human talent, all of those things that are going into making these great institutions. I feel like in this era, what we're supposed to be thinking about or going towards is what we each contribute. And that's a great example of it that the church overtook, and they're currently trying to present it to us in this carefully curated way that takes the power of Michelangelo out of it, or people like him. But it's not in the end about the splendor and just the way the church presents it. It's about the art and the craft.
It's even weirder that every cardinal or bishop, before they go play with the little boy, just thinks of two fingers.
Oh my gosh.
And they don't think about Leonardo da Vinci and showing the Annunciation and showing how to receive and how to give, right? So this is male giving and this is feminine receiving. And you don't see the receiving, you just see
the spark about ready to happen.
Right? That's why they're so obsessed with peepees only. And that's why the 16 Chapels doesn't mean anything to me, because it doesn't represent the universe or the divine.
No, but the beauty of it is what you should care and love.
I know, but I'm
and it is
spiritually,
amazing.
It's the irony, right? That ever since then, it's become pee fest. Because if you study the artwork, it's almost kind of like maybe Michelangelo was secretly seeing that, because if you understand the hand signals of Da Vinci and so forth.
Oh, there's so many codes in that whole painting too.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the code, that it's masculine, and it's not going to work. It's going to fall like Rome.
Is that what Michelangelo was saying, or you're saying that?
That's what I'm saying as a decoder of.
Yeah. I mean, and there's so many codes in that. There's so many great articles. I haven't seen the PPPP interpretation in the academic world, but I don't doubt it, David. I always enjoy hearing your interpretation.
PPPP. Yeah, because they, all the bishops, but mainly the cardinals, they all go there to elect the pope, right? When they're in there.
They sit in there a long time.
Right, and they sit there a long time just staring at two fingers, and they just think of two peepees, and they're just like, I guess that's what's divine for me. Because in the Bible it says, oh, well, okay, or in the church, in their canon laws, oh, I can't have a wife, I can't be with a woman. It doesn't say you can't be with a man. That's why they get away with it. Right? And poor Michelangelo was probably at the other end of that too, a lot during his painting. So I think about that
for
him.
Upbringing.
Kind of sad. But,
But despite all that, he was able to develop such a wonderful gift. And I'm sorry, it's my optimistic nature. I love to see the dark side and all of that. But in the end, I do have faith in humanity and individuals.
Yeah.
If we do learn to be this Aquarian idealized society, because Pluto has tested us through Pluto and Aquarius.
I mean, it hasn't really done the test yet. I think actually the French Revolution is the test halfway through, and Jupiter opposite, or
Yeah.
Jupiter opposite is going to be the test because Jupiter Pluto met in Capricorn. And so, ironically enough, it would have been Jupiter Pluto that met in Aquarius then, because it would have been 6 years back, right? And Pluto would have been in Aquarius. So going to the American Revolution, the French Revolution is not the same power as going back to 1533 and 34. We're in that more.
Yeah.
And that gets me to where I'm like, oh, utopia does die. And plus, utopia never was going to work anyway.
Well, ironically,
Right.
the whole idea of utopia was only made possible as a concept because of actually, it goes back to the ancient Greeks, right? But Thomas More's Utopia, when he was writing about it, he sets a lot of that in the New World, because you could imagine now, there could be societies that live in these different ways that we don't know about. And so, why was the point of that? Like, that's the whole thing about utopia. But then in that, it's not too long after he recognizes that he falls victim to the same things he was critiquing in his book.
Right. I mean, that book actually is kind of creepy, to be honest with you. I mean, it talks about having your own island with your own slave.
Well, yeah. It was,
And so the idea of utopia is actually kind of Epstein Island for these people, right? So that's kind of an irony. But I think what makes this more intense is like the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn
right.
happened in the 1520s. And so the Jupiter opposite Pluto that we're about to go through in 2026 is the same that happened
Yeah.
in the same period that was in the 1530s with the same Neptune and Aries, Pluto and Aquarius.
Yeah.
And so that locks in historically more where you want to go for your data, and that really is the Spanish taking over the Aztecs, Montezuma, and the end of the Aztec Empire, and really the end of the Incas and the Mayan culture completely. And then it's really weird to watch Latin America like all be Catholics. It's just really weird.
Yeah, with this Pope.
They've just all left their history. It's really weird. But then to also realize too that all these institutions, what they're most afraid of ends up happening, and it's not that bad. And they freak out and do all these crazy things to protect what doesn't really matter, or what's not that big of a harm. Like Henry could have just let Thomas More go. He didn't have to sign the thing that he had every citizen sign, that they were part of the Church of England and they gave allegiance to King Henry VIII as head of the church, all that. Like, he didn't have to do that.
Well, he didn't have to. He could have just said,
He could have just
that's
let
okay.
him be.
Don't sign
he
it."
served him so well,
Yeah.
right? That he could have just, nobody would have known. Right?
Well,
it's
he
like
wanted him, but he wanted the public
but he-
spectacle of
right.
him signing it.
And then
yeah.
he cried about it for years after. Right? So, like, that's where, to me, it's like we're in these time periods where it's like what you're most afraid of and losing is really not the thing to worry about. You know? And it's more about what you're just doing, and don't be afraid of, this doesn't feel good and right. Okay, I'm not doing it. But that's really what it comes down to. And that's what's weird about all the Spanish, like the fact that they were okay, because that actually is the bloodiest war ever. The take over the Aztec Empire is the most insane paintings I've seen of actual, like, what it looked like and how... It is kind of crazy because it wasn't like the Aztecs weren't badass or anything. They just didn't have the weapons. Right? They were still using spears. So it was spears against gunpowder. And at the end of the day, gunpowder wins. But they killed so many people. It's insane.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely something brewing with that coming again somewhere. And what's weird is whether you know, there's tens of thousands of North Koreans in Russia, and you got China, and you know, you start looking at all this stuff and you go, oh, like, and already hundreds of thousands of people have been killed in Ukraine and Russia, right? So, and then you have Gaza and all that. You have just all these, and we're just like living and watching.
Yeah.
You know, but it something like that coming. Because that becomes kind of desperation, right? Like at the end of the day, the Pope is the one saying you must go because of the discoveries of Columbus, and the discoveries that come are kind of like, oh, okay, there's gold over there. That was what was the whole reason of Christopher Columbus going. But it's like, no, kill everybody there and convert them into Catholics. That's not a really nice thing. So that's kind of the irony, is as that's going on, they're like, yeah, Henry's the worst person in the world.
Right.
Because he divorced without our approval.
And then
so,
get everybody all hyped up about that.
Right.
You know, like, you should care about Henry VIII.
Right.
We're excommunicating him. Don't pay attention to what we're doing over there. You know?
Yeah, so it's almost like whoever is made to be the bad guy is not the bad guy. That's the other thing about Neptune Aries and Pluto Aquarius. It's like at the end of the day, I'm sure the French could have got better way to just get their freedom and get back to a better life instead of continuing to go. But if you use the same astrology 1530s, it's like, well, look at what the Pope was doing, and he actually thought that was more important than using the Spanish to go into England. Because everybody got sent.
Yeah.
That was quite a... I mean, it's kind of crazy. That's before the Mayflower. That's before all the Jamestown. And that is all the way across the whole seas and taking over a continent, basically, the middle of two continents. And a mathematical, like, mismatch, right?
Yeah.
And winning and killing everyone. And all the children and the women. For Jesus. Fucking wild. But then stealing all the...
Well, for Jesus on the surface, because that's what made you be able to get people to do it or to join the cause. Right? But really, it's what is it that they always say in high school textbooks? It's like guns, glory, and gold or something. Like, that's part of it. It's not just God. It was the guns and the glory and the gold.
It's kind of like what Zionism is today, because all Zionism is nationalist for the state of Israel, like nationalism, right? But it's ironic because it's very Christian connected too. So when you see everybody dying in Gaza, it's very in the name of the Old Testament and the New Testament and the Zionistic viewpoint. So it's already happened, part of it. And I think that's what gets a little weird with if the mayor, right? If he becomes mayor and he's Muslim, that's where like the this is where the Muslim, Jews, and Christians all become, who do we ally to get the other team out? And that's why you're seeing everybody stop in the Middle East so we could square up and backstab each other for the Holy Land. So, and I think this whole, whatever his name is, Zohan, is a plant. It was always meant to go down. It's gonna happen, and they're gonna try and really get weird stuff to go on there, and then that's gonna go. And really, it's not about America; it's about Europe, or Michigan.
Europe or Michigan?
Yeah, because most of the Muslim population in America live in Michigan.
Is it Michigan, not Minneapolis, or not
Michigan.
Minnesota? Okay.
Michigan. Well, Minnesota is also another mayor that might win a race. And I have no problem. It's America. It's not about religion. But it's interesting, though, that it's like, it's a threat to Christians, left and right. And so what might happen could trigger bigger things around the world. Because that's one thing that Democrats and Republicans agree on that are Christians. They don't want a Muslim in there.
You know, David, I never thought about this until right now. I was thinking, well, you know, if you're going to be part of a culture that doesn't have as many children, right? Like Christians in America don't have as many children as probably, I don't even know, I have to look at the statistics, maybe as many as Muslims in other countries. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm just thinking
Muslims
that.
are up to 7 on average.
So
6
So
and
one
7.
of the ways to solve that is bring in a lot of Christians who do have bigger families, and that explains a lot of, you know, I didn't think of it from the perspective of Christian versus anything else at that level, because I just feel like in the modern era, I always think too, I'm always thinking when you talk about, okay, there's going to be this religious war or whatever, right? When you've talked about it in the past, I always think, well, I have to think also metaphorically that certain ideologies have become like religions. But literally, this is the first time I thought, if it's really going to literally be about religion, haven't we learned that lesson? Can we not get over needing to have everybody be the same religion? Like, that was what the United States was supposed to be founded, so that it could be a group of people that have a sense about God, but they don't have to all practice in the same way, you know?
Right, but so like we've been told about global jihad because of 9/11 and all that stuff. The new way the Muslims look at it is we're just going to overpopulate. We're having 7 kids in our families. Muslims are more traditional than Christians as far as families go, with what the wife does and the husband does, right? And the Western Christians aren't having kids anymore, right? Because they still need to go be the big worker first and improve myself, right? And they're still stuck at Pluto Capricorn. And that's what's actually going through all the ranks. If you talk to Muslims on the ground at these protests and stuff, like, we're not even tripping, because in 10 years we're going to take over this whole country. We don't have to even fire a gun, because there's no, you know, white Christian, white Democrat, white Republican, like, are not having babies, right? So good luck. So it will be religious, and it reminds me of The Matrix. If you watch all 4 of them, that's great. The best is Animatrix. It's 9 films in an hour and a half, back to back, where they go into the actual story of what the humans did with creating the robots, and then one of them went rogue. So then they use it as an example, and then people go out in the streets like the French Revolution, start killing all the robots, and so they kill all the robots. Then all the robots that are left end up in the Middle East, and they create this one robo city. And in this robo city, it starts to become robust, and it starts to become really good with creating AI and creating all these robots. And what happens is the world, the UN, does a blockade around the Middle East and around that area where the robots are. Most people don't know the real Matrix story,
I don't
right?
know this.
And so 2 of the robots that represent the robot city go to the UN, and they have an apple, ironically enough. It's almost like the Garden of Eden.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, we want to be part of the UN, and instead of this blockade, let's all be friends, let's do commerce together and do all this. And the United Nations deny them and kill the robots. So it starts the robot wars. And what happens is the robots start winning really quick. They have all the robots, the technology, and that's where the idea then starts to become, we'll torch the skies, because it starts to become to where there's not that many people left. So they decide to nuke the skies, and as they do that, they don't realize that all these robots just start sucking on the human. They keep them alive. They pull them out of like the first like little things you see that they get into, like in Matrix 2 and 3, the battle, the first versions of that. And they just start going, well, you're alive. And they just like hook into them and start draining the energy. And that's when they start building the pods, and they just start doing it. And then they go back to the UN, and they get all the world leaders that were hidden in bunkers and all that. And they have them go there, and they have them sign a paper like, you are now, it doesn't matter. You are under our control, and you're going to enter into our world, and you're paying the price back. And then that's when they load the Matrix, and everybody feels like that they're stuck in there. In the beginning scenes of everybody when they got in there, there's the machines made it to where there's a horrible memory of them realizing, it's like all of them running home, Mom and Dad at the house, and it's like 2 robots. And that's embedded in every single human. So maybe Theory Atlas is opening that up for us.
Oh.
But the irony is that it was the Middle East, and it's like, no, you can't be involved, and you can't. And the more that the West does that, then it's going to create, like the robots, they're having 7 kids on average. And so really the robots did the same thing in the Animatrix series to help you understand what the Matrix is about. Is they just kept building robot after robot and using AI to do it, and they overdid the humans like crazy. And that's exactly what Muslims are saying on the ground today. They're not going to jihad us or anything. They're just going to come and win elections and bring their families over here, and they have 7 kids each, and they're all going to get everybody to follow Allah, and then impose Muslim Sharia law, which Indonesia did that after the tsunami in 2004. It was a mosque that stood up. Indonesia was not Muslim at all. All the governments, Jakarta, was all not Muslim. Now, 95% of Indonesia and the government is Muslim, and it's Sharia law and it's Islamic law throughout Indonesia, including in Bali. You cannot have sex with anybody if you're not married. That's what's coming to the West.
Unless they buy into the Western institutions and don't continue in the same way, because I think a lot of what you see also when people immigrated to places like Britain in the past, or if you look at even, let's look at the English going to Ireland in the 16th century, when people migrate, often people think, okay, good, we're going to send these people over and they're going to institute something new. But then they absorb the culture that they've gone into because it's a more free culture. I mean, not in the Irish case, I'm not talking about that, but if we look at Britain, there's a lot of cultural clashes with the older generations who live in the ways that they lived in their own, the home countries. Then they have children born in the new place who have different values because they're born there. So I think that there's some area for thinking it might play out in a different way.
I don't know. I mean, I think of the Crusades and how at the end of the day, it was not the Christians who won, it was the Muslims. It was the Ottoman Empire. And that's just the facts, the truth.
Yeah,
And,
but it was in that that part of the world. I think.
right, but it was also another population issue too. That everybody in the Ottoman Empire, they had plenty of men, they had plenty of babies, and then they were trying to get all these other countries to get who's the strongest man for God to be a knight to come fight. Wasn't like every man went, but every man from the Ottoman Empire went. And you got to look at the way the Muslims think is for Allah, you will do, you live your life and you do everything. Right? So like it's ironic, and the people are so Jesus obsessed, they won't do anything for Jesus except go to church on Sunday and pray. And, I gave a can of goods to somebody, so I did my good deed. Yet Muslims will do 10 times more. And they're doing it right now. And so all these traditional values that Christians want to maintain, they're not even close. They're football fields away from even coming to an inch close to it. They actually they don't have it in them to even live that life. So at this point, that's why you're seeing maybe the West going to pull off some crazy shit on the Middle East and try and tie them with Iran with China or whatever, and Russia join us. Because the one last place is, even though they meet every year, the Orthodox Church, which you and I covered, right? When a weird anomaly in the skies happened, was the breakup of the Great Schism, which we've covered. 3i Atlas could be the new thing we see that this winter brings the Orthodox Church, the Catholic Church, the Church of England to band together, including Russia, which we did in World War II with the USSR, all against to try and get rid of the threat to Christian nationalism and Zionism, which is the Muslims and the Chinese. So, and that's the matrix. And ironically, where's all the data centers besides America? Middle East. All the deals were made there. So the robot city, like Dubai looks like an alien when you look at it in the buildings, and then Dubai and Qatar and all that. And that's actually, if you study reptilian history, that's where the reptilians live, is in that area, and their spaceships and their caves, and where all the reptiles are found, the oldest reptiles and stuff. And that's where all these data centers are being built. So the matrix system is already being built in the Middle East, the same way that the Matrix movies actually are about, that most people have no idea that's actually where it starts, at the robot
And
city.
where do you watch that?
You can buy it on Apple TV. It's called Animatrix.
And is it a series or it's
It's a
just
movie. It's an hour and a half long, hour and 40 minutes, and it's like 9 animated versions, but they do it in sequence to where this whole thing started and what the humans were like and how they treated the robots. And then those robots were like the first ones, like the ones, basically they look like Tesla robots today. And how that doesn't work out. But then the ones that survive, and when AI gets really powerful with robots, they go create their own city, and they think that the humans think they're okay because they just threw them in the Middle East. Like, let them do their own thing in the Middle East. But then when they actually become super powerful and actually become to where all the commerce has to go through them, they freak out in the UN. They do blockades with the military. It's fucking wild, because that's what you're already seeing in the Straits of Hormuz and all this stuff. It's already playing out. So. And then the Muslims worship the black cube, right? That they have to go to. And the same way in the movie, they actually show all the robots going around a black cube the same way.
Oh, really?
So. And it's ironic that a lot of the Muslim population is the one that's supporting, and the money that's supporting the AI data centers in the Middle East. It'll make people think. Or maybe it's us who gets taken over by the Muslims, which are robot-based. Even China, they have more troops than us, but what's even wilder is that they have all the dog robots and all these robots. They can clear a room better than any of our military. And they have enough for every man, woman, and child in America, because we're only 330 million people.
So watch out for the dog robots.
So if you think about it, that's where it gets very Aztec, Spanish, and the Spanish really just wanted to loot for the Pope.
Right.
Right. So maybe China and Iran have some deeper tie. They already made their tie in 2021 and 2022. But yeah, it's going to get weird. But it won't be the religious war you think of, because who's the better? It's way deeper underneath. And it's kind of weird because the Western Christians have been the ones that have been the tyranny to their own people. It's not like the Muslims have been.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they've been raiding the coffins of people and then doing the vax and forcing them. It's pretty wild. Where in the Middle East, they didn't force the vax. People are forgetting the Middle East isn't vaxxed. People are forgetting that China didn't vax with mRNA.
Mm-hmm.
So out of the 8 billion people and 70% of the population took mRNA, the 30%, they mainly are Muslim and Chinese people. And then the very few rare ones of us in America who didn't take it, or in Europe. The few. So they're already set up for the matrix system. We'll end on that.
Yay.
And you can get converted to be a Muslim the same way an Aztec had to convert to be a Catholic. Because somebody's got to be converted. That's what's going to happen.
Or maybe the Buddhists will rise up.
No, China's done a good job on pushing the Tibetan
maybe
monks
they'll
and
rise
the Buddhists
up.
out. Right? They're pushed out.
Hinduism, will that save us? I don't know.
Well, that's in India. But guess who India's going to align with in the end? BRICS. China. Because at the end of the day, it's kind of like the robot wars. It kind of becomes like, well, we have manufacturing. Right? So there's an industrial revolution in India happening right now, just as much as there's been for 20, 30 years in China. And America and Europe we don't build anything. And so the idea was the robot wars. That's what happened. The idea of like stopping to build things, and that's why America and all these European people are crazy. Like, oh, I just want to buy Bitcoin and I'm going to be rich. Like, you're fucking retard. You're a retard because you just don't even see that actually it's just going to be just like the 16th chapel. You're going to get so close. It's not going to happen. Now there's going to be some Muslim and a Chinese person converting you to be in a new religion and stealing everything, and you didn't have many kids, you were too worried about your career or whatever, or being a strong man or woman, improving yourself first. Good luck.
All right.
I know it's kind of sad, but that's where we're at. So
I don't know what else to say. Happy Halloween. Here I was worried we weren't being Halloweenish enough, and now. No,
Red Dawn has a new truth to it, with Neptune back coming in Aries with Saturn and with Pluto and Aquarius. It's a repeat of the Spanish taking over the Aztecs. And that, if you were to think about, if you knew the players, right, in that war, you would have bet all your money on the Aztecs, not the Spanish. You'd have been like, there's no way that they can invade this whole area, these temples, all these warriors that will eat you. They'll eat you. Right? And these overweight and weird Spanish people who their ancestors were Templar Knights, and they're just hoping to fulfill some sort of legacy for the Pope, right? The same way that Muslim jihadists do that for Allah, or do it for the Ayatollah, or do that, right? Like, or China doing it for their supreme leader, right? The countries that don't do it for supreme leaders and stuff get blown out, like, you know. And that's what's coming. Is you look at the population. It's just like, oh my God. And I go to church on Sunday and I say, all good, brother. That's all good, brother.
Is that what they say?
Yeah, that's what they say at church. All
I
good,
only
brother.
know peace be with you, or
all
peace.
good, bro. Everything's great.
Oh, okay.
They never say what's really wrong.
Yeah.
Christian families, there's nothing wrong. Everything's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Until a robot dog is in their fucking house telling them you're going to be Muslim or Chinese, like, you're not going to be able to serve Jesus anymore. Because that's what happened. You can't do your Aztec shit anymore.
Do you mean you can't literally serve Jesus, or you can't serve him?
Well, what's happened with the Uyghurs in China?
Not good things. Yeah.
And how many people are in that prison camp?
I don't know how many people are.
Over 1 million. So when you think about World War II and you're trying to find, like, where is there a Germany with, like, people in prison camps for their religion and in the millions?
Mm-hmm.
That's China.
Yeah. Yep.
They're the ones who can get to the backside of the moon right now. They're the ones who can do these technologies and can put a fucking weather balloon over us and have our country not even know what the fuck is going on. And everybody just staring up, as they're ordering on DoorDash, like, what? I'm going to Target today. No. That's where it's going to go. And a Matrix. That'll make your whole Matrix story get way more like, you want to be scared on Halloween? Watch Animatrix.
Okay.
Then you'll be like, oh shit, this is happening now.
Mm.
And it's not because of technically AI. It's because of the laziness of Western people and trying to prove themselves and wanting money and not wanting to work and not wanting to build things and not do anything, and just want SNAP benefits and want Social Security and just want to go on a fucking cruise at 70. Do you think Muslims go on vacation? Their vacation is Mecca. You have to do that as a Muslim. It's not Disneyland. Right? So think about that. I mean, if you think about that, that's pretty deep.
Yeah.
So I'm done for sure.
Okay.
Said my piece. I've scared everybody enough today. So that's why the U.S. government's freaking out. That's why Europe's freaking out the most. At least we have guns, so. At least that robot dog will go down before the next one gets my family. You know what I mean? Like, at least I'll get 1 or 2 or 3.
Can't we just also figure out how to program them differently?
No.
No?
Mm-mm. No, you know who's been hacking America and every infrastructure and every fucking system? China.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? It's the only hackers in the world that have infiltrated and then not done anything and then backed away and just took the logins and just... So it's weird. The one thing they do is they get in and then they don't fuck with it. They go, okay, I know how your operation works. Thanks, bye-bye. And then they pull back. But that's, and what they do is all the water treatment plants in America they have access to. So they just change the chemicals in the water to kill you in the shower, right? That quick. Because every water treatment plant, that our water that we chlorinate, right, all that shit, they just can adjust the dials a little bit to put more of this and more of that, and then the water's toxic and will kill you in the shower. Dead. So they can kill half the population just by doing that in one day. You don't need a bomb.
Mm.
That's the first thing they're going to do. especially Pluto Aquarius, water bear. Aquarius is an Aquarius ascendant. First couple degrees, Pluto on top of it. They're going to kill people by the water. That's what they're going to do. It's at night, everybody's asleep, thinking, oh, I got to get up in the morning. I got to take my shower.
So what are we supposed to do? Just not take showers now?
People are going to have to start thinking, very Aquarian, the beaker has to get out, like the test tube, test the water. Is it safe? You can't trust the systems anymore. Everybody's put too much faith into those. So, yeah, because that's what China's got into the most, and then nuclear power plants. Oh, just turn off the cooling. What? Radio? Oh my God, we're having a fucking Chernobyl event. The generator's only got enough diesel for 3 days. Does anybody know how to fix his generator? No, Harry died of COVID 4 years ago. He was always on top of it. Now we got this fucking woke person who doesn't even know what diesel is. That's where the world we're at right now. DEI got this dude in.
Or, I mean, and also just that people don't know the basic anything. Like, do people even know? Would they know how to dig a well? Or would they know how to treat their own water? Or would they know how to work on an engine? Or those skills have just gone away. So
I know a 20-year-old today doesn't know jack shit or own tools like I did, or like, it's kind of scary.
It is when I know more about how an engine works than my kids. I know more about how to check the oil or do basic maintenance.
Look at the alternator or the battery,
and that's my fault. Obviously, I'm owning that I should have given them more practical skills. I don't
think it's parents' faults. I honestly think, when I was a kid, there was auto shop if you wanted it. There was your friends you hung out with. That our idea of fun was buy a car for $400, and we all saved $100 a piece, and we bought a car and tried to fix it. And then once we got it to run, we joyrided that bitch and then sold it. We did that with a Trans Am, an '88 Trans Am. But that was normal. Or we would, to make money, we'd do a car wash and put signs out front and fucking wash people's cars.
Right.
Because lemonade was pretty dumb. You got more money with the car wash. But you don't see any of that. And it's kind of scary too, because most dudes in their 20s, their tools from IKEA, because they put their bed together. It's that's my screwdriver.
It's left over from the box from IKEA.
It's like a leftover Chinese Allen wrench in a drawer. Right? So then you have that problem, and then you have the problem where there's nobody educating in those places. Auto mechanics are hard to find now, right? So that's why they have to pay them more just to keep them at dealerships to stay alive. Shop foremans are the term. Those are the guys who are in charge of all the mechanics, and those guys know the systems, but they're in their 60s, 70s having heart attacks, strokes. They're not passing the info on because these young kids just want to leave for work quick to go drink or watch whatever's on TikTok. So that's where the animatrix is happening. It's not the AI, right? It's all the things that's not the AI that the young generation's not doing anything. And then they have a weird, that's what old people do. Yet whatever they're doing new is nothing new. There's nothing new about it. It's what we used to do. Just lipstick better. So that's what's scary. And actually that's what's kind of weird is people sat back during even Henry's time, and unless people kind of got them together to go come against the king during those civil unrest and that civil war that didn't really turn out to do anything. I mean, that's the most people would do. And most people did, and those were older guys that had been around to see Catherine and the Catholics and all that, and been to the church, the monasteries all the time. But the monasteries were the DMVs, so it was what? The DMV's gone? I can't go see my friar? Fuck. You know, he always hooked me up with some fucking nun to fuck in the back.
I thought it was supposed to be
That's actually
priest or a monk.
Right. Well, whatever. Same shit to me.
An altar boy.
Right? But like, no, they got, because all those nuns were just had kids and pregnant, and just the monks there, just like that was, they made monetary deals with like men who came there, and they were running around. That was the back room of all those monasteries behind the bookshelf. And that, you know, like that today, yeah. Kids don't even, this is what's even crazier, is the young kids don't have sex either. Isn't that weird? That's like weird.
That is some kind of culturally, socially, biologically engineered thing. It's very odd. Because I don't think, was that the case for like the Pluto Sages and Capricorns of old?
Well, that's why, remember when I first met you, I used to say it on Deep Love Tarot all the time if I saw somebody had like Pluto Sag or anything, I'd always go, good luck getting your blanket out and drinking your tea at 8 p.m. and then passing out. Like, what is, like, at 21, I was up for 2 days straight every night. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And there's just something about the young generation that, like, doesn't want to live much, but they do, but they're, like, afraid to do it. It's really weird. So it's like they get frustrated with what they can't do more than anything, but they just got to go do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole lesson, but they don't. There's an ethical thing with Pluto and Sag, or a mental thing, or, you know, and then Pluto Capricorns are like, these people are just retarded here, nobody's got structure. And so actually the young Pluto Caps that are becoming adults now have more structure than the Pluto Sages.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like but they're also not going to get involved with stupid shit. Or, you know, so I feel like Gen Z is kind of screwed. Right?
I do see from the Gen Z folks that I know, there is an effort to learn more skills. People are starting to say, why go to college? Go learn a trade.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you see that more and more. Whether or not they'll be able to actually do all that stuff, I don't know. But there are these movements to take up skills again and do things, right?
Well, it's weird because the economy's showing, whether it's an air conditioning, HVAC person, a car mechanic, all these kind of jobs, these are what are hurting the most. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if you remember just 15 years ago on TV, every commercial was for fucking some trade school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was supposed to be the big thing of the future.
But like then Pluto Capricorn came and was like, you're a degenerate. You went to fucking whatever those schools were called, you know, like you went to
IT Tech or
Tech, or you went to this, or you're going to nursing school
DeVry Academy.
Well, you're a piece of shit, right? So the generation now, they don't have anything like that. And then they're also been embedded with, I only want to do something I saw on TV, because the number one job they want to be is influencers, right? All of them. Whether it's a game, whether it's a model, whether it's whatever it is, it's just an influence. I just want to be an influencer. That's the number one job. It's like 91%. Not everybody can be an influencer. So it's like, that's where it's going to get really weird, is then all these jobs are going to be missing. And then Pluto Aquarius is very much all the holes in the system and electrical systems. And people are going to be like, well, my AC is not working. And the HVAC guy's going to be like, well, I don't have any dudes that want to work. Because that's what I'm running into for my HVAC guy, you know, and he's a high vibrator. He's like, dude, I can't even get anybody.
That's very sad.
Right? Or just even carpet cleaners or whatever. No young dude wants to work. So you're going to have to fix it yourself. That's why I always said Pluto and Aquarius is duct tape life. You better know how to use duct tape to fix it for a moment until you can get the part and do it yourself and learn how to do it.
Right.
So, but then what's weird is it's like people like me, my generation, have tools and shit, and then these young people don't. So it's going to be like, I'm going to have to like fix everybody's shit. Not just my own, but I'm going to have to fix
until
everybody
you
else's.
teach your grandchildren how to do it, and then they'll take over.
Now,
Maybe.
my kids will learn how to do it.
Yeah.
But no, it's like, I can't even believe there's a gap in a whole generation. And then you have the biggest generation who don't want to do anything and want just government subsidies on everything and retirement and just like Social Security, and they don't want to do anything either. So that's what's weird is Gen Z and the baby boomers are the same, just the opposite of each other. They're filling space. So when I think Bill Gates talks about global depopulation, I think they think of his filling space like that. Because then they're all the rich place. Like, who's going to fix my shit?
Who's going to dig my bunker? Who's going to dig the hole from my bunker?
I mean, that's what's
Who's going to fix my elevator?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's not young people coming up.
There should be, I guess, if people want to know where the money's going to be, it's probably there. Or
there's way more money
the wealth,
there.
Whatever it is.
There's more money there than being an influencer at the moment.
Yeah.
Because you could run your own HVAC company and then fucking get hard workers, have 4 trucks doing 7-10 jobs a day, pay those people good, but make fucking $20K a day.
But now there's
people
all
are
these.
So I can't do that. I have to be in my own little bubble that I've created.
Or it's almost like fear of doing that because they haven't been allowed to be out of their bubble because there hasn't been an opportunity. Like they've been kept at home for part of their high school or grade school or whatever.
If I lose this, if I lost all this right now, I have my tools, I have my trucks. I'd be a tow driver with my F-450 and tow cars where I need to go. I'd fix people's shit. I'd be a handyman. But I'd make a lot of money towing, right? Because they're looking for cars. Because then 62,000 California CDL drivers are all illegal immigrants and don't know how to speak English and are getting pulled over and they don't even know what they're doing right now. So right now to get a tow truck is very difficult, right? So to tow cars across the country or stuff like that, like I could do that in a second. Yeah. Right? But it's sad because a 20-year-old dude today they've never driven a big truck. They've never towed anything big. I tow big ass shit. And that was like, my dad threw me in at 15. Like, you're in the fucking truck pulling the U-Haul trailer. Fucking, I'm in the Harley in the back. I'll follow you. And I'm on the 405 freeway at 15 and my brother's 14. Like, are you okay? I'm like, I don't know. I'll figure it out. In the 90s.
Of course, there weren't as many people on the freeway back then. No,
there were. It was packed.
Yeah, that's
LA
crazy.
was packed. Going through LA, fucking towing a 20-foot trailer at 15. Didn't even have a permit or anything. And a fucking 2000 Silverado. Brand new. Like, what the fuck am I doing? Okay. Oh, the brakes, that's how they work hard. But that generation has never been thrown. And then this is the generation that didn't have their dads around a lot. So it's like, that's the big, and not the Muslims though. So they're actually harder. They're like, you need to be jihad right away.
Here's your gun.
Right? Yeah, literally, here's your gun. And anybody who doesn't do anything, you need to learn how to get behind somebody, have them on their knees, drop them, and hit them in the head.
Have you heard about these companies that are buying up all the handyman companies, though? Like, so that it's not just your guy come by to fix things. They're owned by these big conglomerations now.
Same with the HVAC and all that, So it'll be 3 times the price.
Yeah, so I mean, even then, if you learn the skills yourself, you'll be able to make a lot of money because you don't have to charge what they're charging. But they'll try to put you out of business.
No, I think we're going to go to a world in 15 years from now where there is no more you call somebody to fix something. You do it yourself. The way it used to be. Back in the last Pluto Aquarius, you built your own house. Yeah. You didn't go buy a house. You built it.
Yep.
So, that's ironic about Pluto and Aquarius is it's tools. So the other gift is freedom and tools. That's why they were all Masons. That's the secret. But anyway, so we'll end there. I gotta go. But
Yeah. Well, great conversation.
It's gonna be. I just see I could see the souls in the eyes of just like so many people in America and Europe and Western. Just like, what? Like over the next couple of years, like, what? This shouldn't be happening. Like you were sitting in your own shit the whole time. So the great wake up is definitely like gonna be a shock. And it won't be like some pretty shock of like, my Bitcoin saved my life. That's the Pluto always seducing. It's gonna be the opposite. Uh-oh. So, and then if you think most of the economy is a gig economy with people working 2 to 3 jobs, right? The AI and robots are already coming in 2026, right? So like half those jobs will be taken away. So then where are they going to go? There's actually a lot more things to go be than people realize. They just don't want to do them. They're too good for it. Or it's not an easy access. Like, well, it's easy. I already got a car and I could just do the DoorDash thing, or I could just already do. It's like, why don't you actually go do something that isn't just what everybody else does?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. In my AI class, I'm teaching people that 99.9% of people that use AI don't really use AI. They're just, they're stuck in the chat bot and they think they're making something. They're not making shit. They want you to be stuck in there. So, because if you look at the AI moves, it's like, no, you need to run it locally. You need to know how to use the computer with it, and you're not in ChatGPT or Claude. Your model's hooked up to a terminal IDE fucking and building and getting in JSON files and locking them, and people aren't even ready yet. Far away, Right now, the best thing somebody could do is just read how to code. The older terminal coding books, because if you know that with AI, you're unstoppable. That's the only way you're gonna make money in AI now. Like, you have to know how to do all. That's why Mark Zuckerberg fired every manager that didn't know how to code. So every manager in every high-paying position at Meta, which is investing the most money now into AI and everything, the top level people, you have to know how to code. So it's not about your degree anymore. It's like you need to, like, if you're going to work at a car dealer, sorry, you don't know how to do that. We don't even have space for you. You're just getting started. That idea, Pluto and Aquarius isn't, I'm just getting started. Let me just go into this. So, like, you just got to, like, start doing it on your own until you're really good, and then have the balls to fucking show that you can do it. And Neptune Aries is balls, so, spirituality is how much balls you have, not
how much you
chilling
don't.
in the background and putting an FU Trump and having a trans kid. That is over. That's not spiritual. Well, that was the fall of Rome too, but yeah. Have a trans kid.
All right.
All right. Well, it's good to be with you, man. It's always entertaining.
Yep. It's been great.
Everybody can see.
Goodbye, everybody.
Adios. Bye.
Humans are still here. Yay.
Yay, for now.
Yo. Okay.
Vibration create.